The story begins inside a luxurious VIP delivery room where a woman is casually flipping through a magazine, waiting to give birth. But her patience snaps, and she angrily yells at the nurses to hurry up and get the baby out, all while still focused on her magazine. Moments later, the sound of a baby's cry fills the room. A staff member rushes out, joyfully congratulating the grandfather. Guests gather around, offering their congratulations to Mr. Liu, who thanks them graciously for their kindness. Curious, he asks one of the maids about Shikuan's whereabouts, only to hear that the young master is busy handling something on Earth. His expression darkens immediately, furious at his son's absence and calling him a worthless good-for-nothing. Suddenly, a strange, piercing scream echoes from inside the delivery room, leaving everyone startled and uneasy. Mr. Liu quickly stands up, anxious, and demands to know what is happening inside. Inside the room, the mother's eyes widen in shock as a blinding light bursts forth. When the grandfather and his attendants rush in, they are stunned, frozen in disbelief. The dazzling light is coming from the newborn itself, his tiny body wrapped in arcs of golden lightning. To everyone else, it's a miracle, but to the baby, it's something else entirely. In his mind, he smirks, thinking no one would ever believe that a simple commoner like him would be reborn into such a powerful family, awakening with a divine sense. A system screen flickers before his eyes, confirming the activation of a lightning-type divine sense, already reaching sea-level power. The grandfather can hardly believe what he is witnessing. His grandson is born with an innate power he himself could never achieve. His cane slips from his hand as he shouts in astonishment about this unmatched divine talent. Overcome with joy, he lifts the newborn high and declares to all present that the Liu clan has given birth to a once-in-a-generation prodigy. Yet deep inside, the baby harbors his own ambition. He vows to seize everything from this clan and make sure his so-called father never gets another chance at life. Meanwhile, the maids whisper among themselves, amazed that the young master is smiling instead of crying, an omen, they say, of an extraordinary destiny. The elder proudly vows to dedicate the full strength of the clan to raising this child. Yet, our protagonist's mind, thoughts stir. He reflects on the past 6 months since being killed by that vile scumbag, still feeling as if it were all a dream. Just a month ago he was killed by her husband. And reborn as her baby in her belly, she who was now his mother had been drinking a special tonic prepared by one of her loyal maids. The moment the liquid touched her lips, a powerful golden glow began to radiate from her body. Because of this, he gained an extraordinary gift, an accelerated growth ability, and astonishingly, he had already reached D rank even while still in the womb. He couldn't help but marvel at how vast the difference was between powerful clans and commoners. Ordinary people would risk their very lives for the strength he now casually possessed before even being born. But this ability puzzled him. Accelerated growth? There were no known records of such an ability. 2 months later, he found himself in the middle of a dangerous absorption crisis caused by the mother's original embryo. But fortune favored him. Using his accelerated growth, he consumed the original embryo completely and absorbed its power, gaining an innate lightning-type divine sense. Lightning, a rare and formidable element. The thought thrilled him. He vowed to take full advantage of his family's endless resources, nurturing his own body and power until he stood at the very peak. 3 months later, his lightning divine sense had already advanced to an intermediate stage. Meanwhile, an entirely different scene unfolded in the world outside his tiny sanctuary. Women's high heels and scattered underwear littered the floor of his mother's bedroom. On the bed, tangled feet and warm whispers filled the air. His mother lay there with a blonde-haired man, unbothered by the fact she was carrying a child. The man questioned her nervously, asking if she wasn't afraid. She responded coolly, saying her marriage was nothing but a political arrangement. Yet, inside her womb, the fetus, our protagonist, heard everything. The blonde-haired man doubted if the child was even his while the woman ignored his words and passionately urged him to keep going. The noise and chaos of his mother and her secret lover shook the unborn child's energy. Absorption, frustrating him deeply. In irritation, he released a burst of energy that made his mother gasp, complaining it burned her from the inside. By the 6th month, his power had already reached peak D rank, and he came to fully understand the unique constitution of his mother. One day, a handsome man stood silently, gazing at the woman's belly, impatience in his eyes as he wondered when the child would finally be born. From within, the unborn child opened his eyes and glared at the man with seething hatred. His mind branded the man as nothing more than a filthy mutt. Suddenly, a memory from his previous life flashed before him. He recalled the day he was warned about terrifying beasts. One of his comrades, gravely injured, had pleaded with him, calling him Brother Liu, to escape while he still could. The companion cried for help, trapped and desperate, but all the young man could do was stand and watch. That day, his friend was torn apart by a monstrous creature, his screams echoing as the beast devoured him whole, while Liu stood frozen, watching every moment. With a twisted grin, the traitor gives the order, feed the beast and form the spirit core. His eyes gleam with malice as he watches the scene, enjoying every second of his victim's despair. In that moment, the young man notices it, a massive spike hurtling toward him with deadly intent. Before he can react, his former companion drives a huge branch straight through his chest, lifting him into the air without an ounce of mercy. He looks down at the gaping wound, unable to comprehend the betrayal he's just suffered. Laughter erupts from the scumbag, sharp and mocking, echoing in the air as he revels in the moment. He sneers, saying this is what happens when fools overestimate their own strength. The young man is thrown aside like garbage, his body broken. With fading strength, he accuses the traitor of using him as nothing more than bait to feed the beasts. As darkness closes in, only one thought grips his mind: what will become of his little sisters? Memories rush back, him saying goodbye to one of them, promising he would return soon. He recalls grabbing his weapon and stepping out for what seemed like just another mission, leaving behind 3 innocent girls waiting in that small house. That night, under the pale glow of the moon, the sisters stared through the window, whispering to each other about when their big brother would finally come home. Back in the present, within the womb, the reborn protagonist seethes with rage. His heart burns with a single vow: to destroy the one who tore him away from his family. Gathering his energy, even as a fetus, he focuses his power and launches a devastating punch toward the outside. The blow connects, slamming into his so-called father's face with a force no one could have expected. The man is flung backward, crashing to the ground in agony, utterly stunned by the invisible strike. After that, the mother gasped in pain as the child in her belly suddenly started kicking from inside. Meanwhile, the traitorous father writhes on the floor, clutching his face, still unable to comprehend what just happened. The woman groans in frustration, complaining that the child is already causing trouble before even being born. Concerned, the grandfather quickly orders the nurse to check what is going on inside the delivery room. The nurse hesitates for a moment, then explains that the young master's talent is extraordinary, which has caused his development to accelerate far beyond normal. Suddenly, she stops mid-sentence, shocked as she realizes the baby is about to be born. The mother, writhing in pain, screams for someone to summon the best delivery team immediately. Inside the womb, the boy laments, thinking about how in his past life his strength had only reached peak D level, and now, even before birth, he is already on the edge of a breakthrough. A month later, the Liu family hosts a grand banquet in celebration of the newborn. Influential families from across southern Shao arrive with extravagant gifts, eager to honor the clan's future heir. Amid the festivities, the grandfather sits quietly, watching a violin performance with a maid standing at his side. Meanwhile, the 1-month-old protagonist rests peacefully in the arms of another maid, completely calm despite the noisy celebration. A guest steps forward, congratulating Master Leo on his grandson. The elder nods politely, though his thoughts seem far away. Another guest approaches the boy's father, offering him congratulations as well. But the infant's sharp gaze locks onto that man, the same man who betrayed him in his past life. Anger wells up within the baby. This is the very person who tore him away from his sisters. Right there and then, he silently vows revenge. Memories flood back. His little sisters' faces beam with joy as they prepare to share a small birthday cake, their eyes sparkling with excitement. In his past life, he had been on the phone with Brother Chen, who was impatient and scolding him for being late to a mission. He apologized, but Chen only scoffed, secretly thinking he'd hired him just because rumors claimed he was desperate for money. Chen advised him to use his brain better, and the young man thanked him for the job opportunity anyway. Back home, his sisters waited eagerly for him to return so they could finally taste the cake. He had said goodbye to one of them, promising he'd only be gone for work and would be back soon. With that, he grabbed the weapon stored in his bag and stepped out, leaving the 3 little girls alone, waiting anxiously for his return. That night, they sat by the window, looking at the moon, whispering their wish for their big brother to come home quickly. Elsewhere, in a shadowy forest, a mysterious glowing portal shimmers. A man approaches, cigarette dangling from his lips. It's the same man who had congratulated young Master Ji earlier at the banquet, young Master Ji himself, the apparent leader of some dangerous, secretive operation. Surrounded by his loyal subordinates, young Master Ji calmly asks about the progress of their mission. One of his men quickly reports that they've been inside for some time and the beasts should be well fed by now. Pleased, young Master Ji compliments old Chen, praising how efficiently he works and noting he must have been raised well. Turning to the woman beside him, he states that this entire trip was done for her sake. But she only scoffs, mocking him as nothing more than another lowlife from the Ji family, desperate to climb the social ladder. Ignoring the insult, the group of traitors heads toward the glowing portal, preparing to leave that barren, desolate place behind. Meanwhile, in another part of the wasteland, one of the hero's companions urgently warns him of a dangerous beast nearby. To their surprise, young Master Ji is informed someone has survived the earlier massacre, something he didn't expect. He smirks, mentioning that more food will be useful for their medicine. Old Chen frowns, confused, explaining that everyone they encountered was only D-level soldiers. How could anyone still be alive? Suddenly, a deafening noise echoes through the area, drawing every eye in one direction. Their leader's expression hardens as he assesses the situation. Soon, the source of the commotion is revealed, a beast with a fresh wound in its leg, glaring at a lone figure. There he is, the young man, battered and exhausted, standing his ground for what might be his final battle. One of the traders cautiously steps forward, but young Master Ji demands to know who dared injure his beast. Then his eyes widen in recognition. He knows the survivor. Yen, he says in shock. The young man turns his head, confused, calling out to brother Chen, still trying to understand what's happening. Chen's friend nervously asks if he had brought reinforcements, and in a panic, several enemies scatter and flee from the scene. Back in the present timeline, the reborn baby clenches his tiny fists, vowing to avenge that deep blood feud. He reaches his arms out, making soft baby noises at the trader now standing in front of him. The man freezes, speechless, unable to comprehend what the child wants. The baby's father proudly explains that his son wants to be held, calling it the greatest honor of his life. With that, the trader cautiously picks up the child, even thanking him for what he calls an unexpected reward. The little one lets out a pretend cry, masking his true intention. In an instant, yellow lightning energy bursts from his tiny body, shocking the trader with a surge of power. The man screams in agony as electricity courses through him, forcing his hands to release their grip. The baby falls hard onto the mansion's floor, the loud thud drawing gasps from the women at the party and halting the music mid-performance. All eyes turn toward the scene. The grandfather watches silently, his expression unreadable, while the baby's parents stand frozen, shocked at what just unfolded. On the floor, the child immediately cries loudly, keeping up his innocent facade and fooling everyone around him. The trader, now drenched in cold sweat, trembles in panic, realizing how badly things have gone wrong. Terrified by what had just happened, the trader freezes in fear. The grandfather's face twists in rage as he shouts, furious that someone dared to drop the Liu family's precious heir on the floor. The coward immediately throws himself down, groveling at their feet. He desperately claims it wasn't his fault, insisting the young master moved on his own. But the baby's father doesn't believe a word. With a glare filled with contempt, he delivers a brutal kick to the man's chest, calling him nothing but a dog. The impact sends the trader crashing across the marble floor, groaning in pain. Crawling on his hands and knees, he begs for forgiveness, swearing he would never harm the boy intentionally. As proof of loyalty, he even offers up his treasures to ensure the young master's injuries are treated. But instead of sympathy, the baby's father gives him a cold, mocking smile, clearly enjoying his humiliation. With an icy tone, he orders the guards to drag the man outside and give him a proper beating. Pathetically, the trader thanks him for the punishment, trembling as the guard sees him. Meanwhile, a maid carefully lifts the baby back into her arms. Hidden against her shoulder, the infant protagonist curls his lips into an evil, satisfied smirk at how perfectly his little plan worked. The trader, now bruised and dazed, stares in confusion, unable to comprehend how everything had spiraled so quickly. But the clever child immediately starts wailing again, crying loudly to maintain his perfect innocent facade. The old trader stumbles in shock, unable to believe the child switched back to crying so easily. The grandfather wastes no time, ordering the maid to take the young master inside and check if he suffered any injuries from the fall. Once the child is taken away, the elder turns his cold gaze to his son, sharply criticizing him. With their family status, he says, there's no need to keep worthless bums around. His words sting deeply, and with a dismissive snort, the patriarch storms out of the party, furious at the disgraceful scene. The boy's father clenches a wine glass so hard in his grip that it shatters in his bare hand, blood dripping from his palm. His rage boils over as he lashes out, delivering a brutal kick straight into the trader's face. Not stopping there, he kicks him again before ordering the guards to drag him outside and feed him to the house dogs. The trader's pleas for mercy fall on deaf ears as he's hauled away like trash. The host then calmly tells the stunned guests to continue enjoying the party, while the baby quietly plans how to absorb more power and grow stronger. A doctor is summoned to examine the infant, quickly confirming that the child's body is incredibly resilient and perfectly unharmed. Hearing this, the grandfather bursts into laughter, proudly celebrating that his grandson is safe and strong. But for the young protagonist, there is something far more important than family pride, finding the three sisters he left behind in his previous life. He knows he must grow quickly, fast enough to move on his own and claim the essence he needs. For now, though, he begins crying for milk, signaling for nourishment. The elder immediately orders the daughter-in-law to breastfeed the child and ensure she consumes more spiritual medicine to improve her health. The mother, exhausted and pale, complains that she had just fed him moments ago. Still, the patriarch is unmoved, sternly telling her that she must endure this hardship for the sake of the clan and their heir. With visible frustration, she removes her coat and picks up the child, preparing to feed him once again against her will. As she stares down at her son with tired, red eyes, she begins to breastfeed him. But even through her fatigue, she can't help but groan in pain, complaining that the little rascal is sucking far too hard. Seeing his daughter-in-law becoming pale and weak, the grandfather immediately orders tonic soup to be brought for her nourishment. Soon after, the scene shifts to a hot spring where the baby is bathing with his mother. She sighs in exhaustion, complaining that he's been feeding endlessly and jokingly asks if she must have owed him a debt in a past life. 3 months pass, and the baby has grown rapidly, now crawling all over the house with surprising speed. His power has already reached sea level, a pace that astonishes even him. In his previous life, reaching such strength took him an entire year, advancing from elementary D level to intermediate only after surviving dangerous portal missions and suffering numerous injuries. But this time, drinking his mother's milk has pushed him from elementary C level to intermediate in just 3 short months. During one family dinner, the little protagonist crawls determinedly toward the main table. The grandfather, irritated, scolds the staff for letting the heir roam freely. The maid quickly apologizes, explaining that the boy crawls so fast she can't keep up with him. The baby's father jokes that his son must simply want more milk, while the mother looks drained and complains she's been breastfeeding nonstop for 3 months without rest. But in the baby's mind, he's focused, there's no time to waste, he must keep getting stronger, no matter what. To everyone's shock, the infant suddenly stands up on his own, wobbling but steady. The grandfather and butler stare wide-eyed at this incredible sight. Then, to their amazement, he begins walking, his tiny feet taking steps toward his stunned mother. Without warning, he leaps at her, making her yelp as she scolded him, begging to at least let her eat one meal in peace. The maid, stunned, exclaims that the young master is standing and walking by himself, while the butler remarks on the child's extraordinary celestial constitution. The grandfather beams with pride, pleased beyond words by his grandson's rapid development. He then declares it is time to follow family tradition, selecting a personal servant for the boy. In a dark chamber, preparations are underway for the selection. The elder in charge asks for an update, and a guard reports that only 2 candidates remain. Soon, the protagonist, nestled in his mother's arms, is brought to an improvised arena where the final test will take place. He watches carefully, but then freezes, his eyes widening in shock. Among the candidates, he recognizes one of them. Inside the arena, a small girl with white hair stands in a defensive stance, her expression filled with fear. Opposite her, a blonde girl charges aggressively, shouting as she prepares to strike. The baby's mind races, what is she doing here? His body reacts instinctively, glowing with intense light as he activates his lightning-type divine power. In an instant, a bolt of energy arcs out, striking the blonde fighter. She is blasted off her feet, crashing to the ground and knocked out cold, leaving everyone stunned by the unexpected display. The white-haired girl wastes no time, lunging forward and snatching up the bread. Without hesitation, she devours it hungrily, crouched in the middle of the cell as if the world around her doesn't exist. Watching from his crib, the baby protagonist stiffens in panic, praying no one notices anything strange about what just happened. But instead of suspicion, the grandfather bursts into hearty laughter, declaring that his grandson has far more fighting spirit than his own father ever did. The baby sighs in relief, thinking that being a child definitely has its perks, adults always find a way to excuse his behavior. The elder then decides on the spot that the little girl will serve as the young master's personal attendant. He orders that she be cleaned up and taught proper etiquette. The girl, however, doesn't seem to care about appearances, still eating ferociously as though nothing else matters. Meanwhile, the baby beams happily from his crib, calling out to his new servant with a wide grin. The butler steps forward, explaining the details of her role. She is a death servant, meaning her sole purpose is to protect the young master at any cost. The white-haired girl simply nods, silently accepting her new fate. The butler added that she needed to follow the master constantly and train in martial arts while her master slept. Soon after, the butler left, closing the door while the girl stayed in the baby's room to begin her new duties. The young protagonist excitedly calls to her and points at himself with a big, innocent smile. But instead of showing loyalty, she pulls out a knife, her expression twisting into one of pure hatred and vengeance. The baby freezes in panic, struggling to speak but unable to make more than baby sounds. The girl hisses through clenched teeth that she will end his life to avenge her older brother's death. With a sharp movement, she lunges, knife poised to strike the defenseless infant. But in a shocking display of agility, the baby dodges the blow, leaping out of the crib and leaving behind a shimmering energy afterimage. The girl's eyes widen in disbelief as he suddenly reappears at her side, moving far faster than she ever imagined a newborn could. As she regains her stance, a green aura bursts from her body, wind energy swirling around her. The protagonist is stunned to realize she wields a rare wind-type divine sense. She charges, wind slicing through the air, but he reacts instantly, summoning his lightning power to defend himself. The clash of wind and lightning fills the room with dazzling flashes of color, the energies colliding in a blinding storm. Inside, the baby grits his teeth, thinking how overwhelming it is to use this much power in such a fragile body. Suddenly, an idea sparks in his mind. Instead of overpowering her, he channels his thunder divine sense at the lowest possible level, forming a tiny lightning spear. It strikes her directly, sending a surge through her body that paralyzes her on the spot. The girl collapses to the ground, her body trembling as the electricity still dances across her nerves. The baby breathes a sigh of relief, though visibly exhausted from the effort. Meanwhile, the girl lies there, stunned, her body still twitching from the electric shock. The baby approaches cautiously, reaching for the sharp edge of the knife. With deliberate intent, he pricks his tiny finger, letting a single drop of blood roll down. Using it, he quickly scrawls a message on the floor, proud of his quick thinking and ability to communicate despite his limitations. The white-haired girl glances down and stares at the message, finally understanding its meaning. The baby then stretches his arms wide, signaling for a hug, hoping to show he means no harm. But she charges at him again. Only then does he remember, she can't read yet. Dodging swiftly, he panics, knowing that if anyone sees her attacking him, her fate will be sealed. Meanwhile, down the hall, the traitor walks through the mansion holding a wooden box tightly in his hands. A flashback plays in his mind, the man coldly telling him that he's only alive because he's still useful. Grateful yet humiliated, the man had bowed, thanking the young master for his mercy and vowing to work harder. He had spent everything he owned to buy a rare item at auction, desperate to earn the baby's favor and save his own skin. Now, as he nears the nursery, he hears the sound of the young master's voice and pauses, curiosity sparking. What could be happening inside? Pushing the door open, he steps in, calling out the name of the Liu family heir. But the sight before him makes him freeze. The baby and the girl are darting around the room, chasing one another in chaos. Sensing an opportunity, the infant protagonist's eyes darken with a cunning glint. A plan forms instantly. Grabbing the servant's hand mid-swing, he redirects the knife, channeling a surge of lightning directly into her forehead. The shock makes her body seize, and she collapses onto the rug, unconscious. Seizing the moment, the baby snatches the falling knife from the air and, without hesitation, plunges it into his own shoulder. Blood sprays as he completes his twisted yet perfect setup. The traitor stares in shock, unable to comprehend what he's seeing, and screams in terror. The baby then tosses the bloody knife directly at him. Instinctively, the man catches it, staring in horror at the blood-stained blade now in his hand. In his shock, he fumbles, dropping the precious wooden box he had brought as an offering. The baby, not wasting a second, takes a deep breath and unleashes a loud, heart-wrenching wail, collapsing dramatically on top of the unconscious girl. By the time the others rush into the room, led by the grandfather, the traitor is standing there, trembling, holding a bloodied knife, the white-haired servant unconscious on the floor, and the baby crying in pain. The elder and his son stand frozen, their faces tense as they take in the chaotic scene. The baby keeps up his loud crying, clinging to the fainted servant as if shielding her. The grandfather's fury erupts instantly. He points at the traitor, accusing him of daring to attack the Liu family heir. In a panic, the man throws the bloody knife to the floor and desperately tries to defend himself, insisting it's not what it looks like. But the baby's father doesn't buy it. His fist connects with the man's face, knocking him back as he roars about harming his son. Choking back panic, the traitor blurts out that the girl was the one who attacked, and he only acted to protect the baby. Still, the infant keeps up his tearful performance, while the accused man bleeds and pleads, his voice breaking with desperation. He swears to the elder he's telling the truth, but his words fall on deaf ears. The father's patience snaps again, another punch lands squarely on the man's jaw, followed by a furious demand, "Where's the gift you brought?" Scrambling, the traitor searches frantically for the box he had dropped amid the chaos. Meanwhile, the elder praised the unconscious white-haired girl for risking her life to protect his grandson, and orders the staff to take her away and let her rest. Placing a heavy hand on his own son's shoulder, the elder glares, his crimson eyes burning with rage. His voice drips with contempt as he says he taught his son how to raise dogs, yet he nearly lost the family's greatest hope because of one. As everyone leaves the room, the traitor remains kneeling, trembling as a cold sweat breaks across his forehead. The baby's father stops at the doorway and throws one last look of pure hatred and disgust. He kicks the man to the ground, spitting out, "I gave you a chance, and you still dared to betray me." With one sharp command, he orders the man to be dragged out and fed to the dogs. In his crib, the infant protagonist finally exhales in relief. His plan worked flawlessly. But then his eyes shift to the unconscious servant, worry flickering across his face. The butler steps in, announcing he must take the girl for treatment. Panic grips the baby as he remembers, the message he wrote in blood is still beneath her. He throws himself across her body and shakes his head furiously, trying to stop the butler. Instead, the staff simply lifts the young master away and places him gently back into his crib. The boy's eyes dart nervously as he debates shocking the butler with lightning to keep him from seeing the message. But then, an idea strikes him, and he glances toward the maid, silently forming a backup plan. The butler lifts the servant, revealing an unexpected pool of blood beneath her. The baby freezes in shock. She's not just acting, she's truly hurt. Even the butler hesitates, taken aback by the blood soaking her clothes. Confused, the infant wonders how she could have been injured for real. Still, the butler hurries her out of the room and orders the mess cleaned immediately. Alone now, the boy lies back in his crib, releasing a long breath of relief, though his mind lingers on the unanswered questions. For now, though, he pushes it aside. He has more important things to do. He leaps out of the crib, ready to set his next plan in motion. In another room, warm oil is being prepared for his mother, who enjoys a rare moment of peace as one of the maids massages her back. The calm doesn't last long. Her relaxation is shattered by the sound of her baby calling for milk again. The little one crawls straight to her, earning an exhausted groan as she complains about his relentless appetite. She cradles him anyway, but sighs, asking how long he plans to keep feeding like this. The baby ignores her frustration. He needs strength, and fast. Every sip is one step closer to speaking, one step closer to explaining everything to his servant and continuing his revenge plan. A week passes in the luxurious Liu family mansion, and time feels like it's slipping by in a blink. In what seems like no time at all, our main character now looks like a 3-year-old and has finally mastered speaking. The little white-haired servant girl still watches him with sharp, suspicious eyes. In her mind, he's still the one responsible for what happened to her older brother. Then, without any warning, the boy turns to her and quietly tells her something that shakes her to the core: he's her brother. The girl freezes on the spot, her entire body stiffening as her eyes slowly turn a deep shade of red. He then softly asks if the cake her brother bought for her was tasty. That simple question sends her mind spiraling into the past. She remembers her brother calling her and her sisters over to share a cake. The 3 little girls lit up with excitement the moment they saw the birthday cake in front of them. Her brother sliced pieces for his little sisters, smiling warmly, but soon got a call ordering him to join his team for a mission. One of the sisters tried to sneak a piece early, only for another to stop her, insisting they wait until their brother returned. Later that night, the 3 sat by the window, gazing at the moon, waiting for him to come back. In that moment, his old face appeared in the reflection of the full moon, blending seamlessly with his current childlike features. His eyes softened, a gentle smile forming as tears began to gather. When she realizes the truth, her emotions overwhelm her. Tears spill down her cheeks, and she collapses to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The boy quickly covers her mouth, urging her to be quiet so no one will discover their secret. His small hands try to muffle her cries, but the emotion is too strong. Without hesitation, she wraps her arms tightly around him, holding on as if afraid he'll disappear. Her voice trembles as she asks if the little boy before her is truly her beloved brother. But his tiny body struggles under the pressure of her grip, and he lets out a breathless complaint. In this small frame, her hug is almost too much for him to handle. She finally releases him. Our guy sways a little, still trying to catch his breath. Once the dizziness fades, his gaze hardens as he locks eyes with his sister. He needs answers. He grabs her shoulders and demands to know how she ended up in this place, and where their other sisters are. His questions come one after another, too fast for her to keep up. Overwhelmed, she pleads with him to slow down. Eventually, the two steady themselves, ready to talk about everything that's happened. She begins explaining. That day, he had left for a mission and never returned. In her memory, the 3 hungry sisters huddled together, their eyes fixed on the moon, silently wishing for their brother to return soon. One wondered why their brother was taking so long. The youngest even asked if maybe he had abandoned them. He'd never been gone this long before. Determined to find him, she decided to go search. She made her way to the mission headquarters, only to learn he had vanished. There, she saw another hunter's wife furiously confronting a certain man, calling him a traitor, demanding to know where her husband was. The man, impatient and cold, snapped at her, calling her crazy before shoving her aside. Then another hunter stepped forward, accusing the man of going into the portal with young Master Lu and the others. It was in that moment she realized, this man was involved. The so-called traitor just stood there with a bored expression, calmly smoking his cigarette. Then, without warning, he summoned his firepower. A blazing fireball shot straight toward the accuser, who froze in terror. The flame struck him directly, engulfing his body in searing heat. He collapsed to the ground, defeated, while everyone else just stood by, doing nothing. The traitor warned them not to spread rumors about the young master, claiming the mission was high risk. Back in the present, her brother mutters that the man got exactly what he deserved for betraying them, then presses her for news about the other girls. At that, her expression shifts instantly. Worry fills her eyes. And then, the tears come again, harder this time. Her brother stares in shock, completely thrown by her sudden breakdown. Through sobs, she says she only wanted revenge for what happened to him. But that's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a flood of demons poured through. A portal ripped open, and chaos erupted. People ran in every direction, desperately trying to escape as the invasion began. The memory of that demonic tide still haunts her to the core. She races through the shattered streets, voice trembling as she calls out the names of her other 2 sisters. Not far away, a pair of hunters walk past, casually commenting on how fierce this monster wave had been. She's left standing there, alone, watching the flames consume what's left of the city. Everything around her is nothing but ruins. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she runs blindly through the chaos, weaving between broken walls and piles of debris. Her hands are cut and bleeding as she digs through the rubble, desperately hoping to find her sisters. But with each step, her hope fades, until she collapses to the ground, screaming their names in raw despair. Then, her mind shifts, she remembers her brother. The thought shatters what little strength she had left, and she breaks down completely, sobbing, wondering where he could possibly be. Back in the present, the main character pulls his sister close, telling her not to cry, because this time, fate has given them another chance. His eyes glow with a dangerous red light as he swears that a man named Chen will be the very first to pay the price. Somewhere deep inside a damp, foul-smelling prison, a narrow hallway is smeared with old stains. Inside one of the cells, the traitor paces frantically, shouting that he's innocent, claiming he was only there to deliver a gift. His words cut off when he slammed against the bars, eyes going wide in horror. A demon stands right behind him, its shadow stretching across the filthy floor. The man drops to his knees, begging for his life as the creature leans in, its grotesque tongue sliding out. His pleas turn into a blood-curdling scream, and when silence returns, the hallway has gained a few fresh red stains. With the traitor gone, the main character declares that it's time to tear the Liu family apart from the inside out. His sister, wiping away the last of her tears, nods and says she'll follow his lead no matter what. Then, as if suddenly remembering something important, she lifts him right off the ground. She cheerfully announces that it's bath time. He shouts in protest, yelling that he's her brother, not some kid to be carried around. But she only grins, explaining that she's now his personal maid, and this is part of her daily duties. Without giving him a choice, she marches toward the bathroom with him in her arms, while he kicks and screams like his life depends on it. The scene shifts to the bathroom, where the boy stands on a small tub, confused about what's happening, while the girl calmly prepares everything as if it were completely normal. She steps closer and says it's time for him to take off his clothes. He quickly insists he can manage on his own, but she ignores him. With a playful grin, she whisks his clothes away in one swift motion. Glancing down, she teases him about how cute his little elephant looks. After hearing this, tears welled up in his eyes from sheer embarrassment, and he felt like dropping dead on the spot. Completely mortified, he shouts at her to stop looking, reminding her that this is absolutely not okay. But she simply declares that now that she's grown bigger, it's her turn to give him a bath. The MC stares in shock, demanding to know what she's doing as she begins removing her own clothes. He quickly covers his eyes, unable to handle the awkwardness. Wrapped in a towel, she steps into the tub with him, leaving him frozen in disbelief. As she washes him, she starts talking about the suffering people endure while the wealthy waste resources without a care. Hearing this, the MC's expression hardens. He says justice is something you have to take into your own hands. His voice carries a firm resolve to change the unfair reality around them. Moments later, she offers to scrub his tiny elephant as well, sending him into a mild panic. He refuses instantly, but she goes ahead anyway, saying that as his personal maid, it's her duty to wash him properly. They keep bickering until the bath finally comes to an end. Now lying on the floor like a corpse, the boy stares into the void while his sister calmly folds and puts away his clothes, as if nothing happened. Inside, he feels utterly humiliated. Being the older brother yet treated like a helpless child is unbearable. She notices something is wrong and asks him directly, but he turns his head away, ignoring her. Hurt by his coldness, she says he's never acted this mean to her before. To avoid dragging the moment out, he stands up and says he's not angry anymore, adding that he has something important to ask. She brightens immediately, telling him to ask whatever he wants. He asks if she has awakened a wind element ability. She nods, confirming it. His eyes widen. The youngest recorded awakening was at 12 years old, yet here she is, far younger and with no training at all. He asks how she managed it, but she admits she isn't sure. She explains that a strange panel appeared, showing her stats and guiding her to awaken her power. Hearing the word panel from her shocks him. He immediately recalls his own system, the one that displays his thunder abilities, and wonders if hers is the same. The thought races through his mind, how did she get a panel and awaken so young? She notices him spacing out and asks if something's wrong, but he brushes it off. Instead, he tells her that since she's awakened, she must train hard to grow stronger. With determination in her eyes, she promises she'll train as much as she can. He smiles faintly, patting her head, saying that out of all his sisters, she's always been the most responsible. Suddenly, a knock echoes from their bedroom door, and the two freeze. A maid entered the room and informed them that dinner was ready, adding that the master had instructed their mother to prepare some milk for him. She handed a filled baby bottle to the MC sister, who looked at it in surprise. Taking the bottle into her hands, she glanced at her brother, who was already approaching with a new scheme brewing in his mind. He told her they needed to use every advantage the Liu family possessed to grow stronger as quickly as possible. The girl frowned, saying she was already pushing herself to the limit in training. With a sly grin, he told her to open her mouth and promised she'd find out the secret to gaining more power. Although hesitant, curiosity got the better of her, and she did as he asked. Without warning, he placed the bottle between her lips and told her to drink. She obeyed, sipping the milk under his watchful gaze. Almost instantly, a faint purple aura began swirling around her, causing her eyes to widen in shock. She asked why such incredible energy was flowing through her so effortlessly. The MC explained that their mother's special constitution could transform crystals into a pure energy-like substance, something even elite squads struggled to obtain during missions. Yet, their mother could produce this essence endlessly, making her a living fountain of strength. The revelation left his sister speechless. She remarked that nothing like this was ever mentioned at the academy. The MC's expression hardened as he speculated that noble families were hiding countless secrets while manipulating others to fight their battles. Determined, he declared that they would uncover every hidden truth. His sister then offered the bottle to him, suggesting he drink as well. But he shook his head, telling her to finish it herself and push her limits first. With that, he turned and walked away, muttering that he was going to eat too, leaving her to keep drinking. When he entered his mother's room, the maids exchanged puzzled looks, wondering why he had returned so soon. The scene shifted to him feeding directly from his mother while she lounged in the household pool. The woman complained that she had already given him so much milk, yet he still kept drinking without pause. One maid quickly ordered the others to prepare more medicinal meals for the madam. Inwardly, the MC vowed that their path of revenge was starting now. He and his sister would overturn the very order of the heavens itself. Thunder roared above the mansion as he swore to flip the Liu family's world upside down. Back in his bedroom, he crawled across the floor with unwavering focus, searching for something important. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a memory of the traitor in utter panic. He was shouting in desperation, claiming the gift had been in his hand just moments ago, while frantically searching around. At that moment, the MC crouched down, peeking under a piece of furniture. There, he spotted a small box that the traitor must have dropped. A sly smile formed on his face as he picked it up, certain that anything this well guarded had to be valuable to the family. He flipped the lid open and a brilliant blue glow spilled across his young face. Inside rested a large azure crystal. He muttered to himself, wondering if it was a magic beast crystal. But before he could think further, a system panel appeared before his eyes, identifying it as a rare thunder element skill crystal. This left him stunned. He never knew skills could be absorbed directly instead of painstakingly cultivated. The system calmly explained that after defeating evolved beasts, there's a chance of obtaining treasures like this. The boy's surprise quickly turned into suspicion as he demanded to know how the voice seemed to read his thoughts. His heart skipped a beat when the answer came. The voice claimed it existed inside his very consciousness. The MC scoffed, saying he'd read countless novels with this exact cliché. Back in his previous life, he had been a student obsessed with games and web novels, stories where protagonists with systems would overturn their fates and get revenge on their enemies. Anger flared in him as he shouted that the system was useless. The voice snapped back, reminding him that without it, he wouldn't even be here, reincarnated in this world. That made him hesitate. He didn't like admitting it, but the voice had a point. Crossing his arms, he demanded to know whether it had any connection to his little sister's system. The voice denied it outright, urging him instead to focus on growing stronger quickly. Accepting that advice, the boy set his mind to the task. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, he gripped the crystal tightly and began absorbing its energy with fierce determination. Soon, an overwhelming divine energy surged through his small body. Moments later, he stretched out his palm, and a gleaming lightning spear materialized in his grasp. He could hardly believe it. This was a skill that would normally take 10 long years to master, now his in an instant. Feeling the dense power thrumming within the weapon, he grew curious about its true might. Without hesitation, he hurled the spear with full strength, eager to see the destruction it could cause. The loud blast draws the grandfather's attention. He rushes over with the butler to see what happened. But instead of chaos, they're met with a strange sight, the boy's father standing there in his SpongeBob underwear, arguing with the MC's mother about the noise. The scene leaves both the grandfather and the MC's little sister completely stunned. They glance at the massive hole in the mansion wall near the boy, the result of his newly awakened skill. The grandfather's face darkens in anger as he demands to know who caused the damage. The butler explains that he heard the crack of lightning coming from this room, which could only mean one thing. The moment the grandfather lays eyes on his grandson, his anger vanishes. With pride, he lifts the boy into the air, celebrating the arrival of a divine skill within the family. Turning to the boy's mother, the grandfather praises her for contributing greatly to the family's future, while the mother silently thinks about escaping her son's never-ending hunger. Meanwhile, the boy's father looks irritated, still grumbling about being woken from his sleep. That earns him a sharp scolding from the grandfather, who insists he should be proud to have such an exceptionally talented son. Without hesitation, the grandfather announces that he will take his grandson to the family's annual hunting festival. He asks the butler if everything is ready for the event, then laughs, saying the younger generation must learn their true value early in life. As always, the boy leaps onto his mother's chest for milk, while he and his sister remain clueless about what is being plotted. The grandfather, meanwhile, walks down a long hallway. And the grandfather channels his energy and opens a massive circular gate before them. The metal rings hum as a swirling vortex of bright purple energy blooms into existence. Standing at the threshold of the dimensional portal, the family head prepares to lead them inside. The MC stares in disbelief. The Liu family can create portals on their own. Anger stirs in him at the thought of how many secrets the powerful keep hidden while the weak struggle just to survive. Stepping through the portal, they emerge in a dense and silent forest. The grandfather continues to boast about his grandson, while the MC's mother mutters about how he never stops eating. Suddenly, the MC's father shouts a warning and points to the sky. A trail of smoke streaks toward them at incredible speed. Whatever it is slices through the trees in a blur. Moments later, a massive multi-headed serpent bursts into view, violently tearing into a group of hunters. One hunter strikes, but his weapon shatters instantly. Another raises a force field in desperate defense. When the MC spots two C-rank pythons and a B-rank python king in what should have been a simple C-rank dungeon, both he and his sister freeze in shock. Their eyes widen even more as they recognize one of the hunters battling the pythons. It's his sister, the one with striking red hair. Before they can react, one of the serpents lunges toward her with terrifying speed. To everyone's shock, our boy sister somehow holds the serpent's massive jaws apart with nothing but her bare hands. Her muscles tremble under the pressure, and sweat beads down her face as she struggles to keep those dagger-like fangs from snapping shut on her. But the beast's sheer strength is overwhelming, yet somehow, the boy's sister manages to tear off the head of one of the snake's head with her bare hands. The hunter's leader wastes no time, shouting for everyone to get out of the deadly zone. Shield in hand, he steps forward to block the massive snake monster's advance. But before he can react, a fellow hunter suddenly lunges at him from behind. The girl sees it and screams at the top of her lungs, warning him to watch out. Her voice cuts through the chaos, but it's too late. The attacker's fist smashes straight through the shield, slamming into the captain with bone-crushing force. The blow knocks the shield clean from his grasp just as the serpent rears back to strike. Then, out of nowhere, a surge of purple lightning tears through the air, crashing into the beast. The source is another hunter, his gaze locked on the monster. Fury erupts among the group as one man yells at the attacker for striking their captain. But the traitor only grins, a wicked glint in his eyes, and turns toward the one who spoke. With a swift, brutal motion, he delivers a devastating punch, leaving his opponent severely wounded. A nearby hunter freezes in shock, his voice trembling as he names the attacker, Kyung, a convicted criminal from the past. Kyung just bursts into a wild, unhinged laugh at the fear in their eyes. He follows it with a vicious kick, sending the injured man hurtling straight toward the gaping jaws of the giant serpent, which swallows him whole. Watching all of this with an icy stare, our young protagonist can't help but recall the past. He remembers Kuei Shan tossing a friend to his death without a shred of hesitation. The sight of blood in the air mirrors that haunting memory. One by one, his friends had been picked off back then. The monster they were feeding with their own comrades had risen, colossal and terrifying. And standing there with a twisted smile, his father had ordered them to keep feeding it so that a treasure could be formed. Without pause, he had commanded Kyung to attack his younger self. The henchman charged forward, ready to finish him. But in that moment, the boy from the past had awakened his power, his fist blazing with energy as he met Kyung head-on. Their fists collided, the shockwave rippling through the battlefield. It was in that clash he realized, Kyung was a demon in human form, someone who took pleasure in crushing others. Backed by the Liu family, he had become one of their most dangerous lackeys. Back in the present, the red-haired girl's life hangs in the balance. The sister turns to our protagonist, desperate, asking how they can possibly save her. A plan was already brewing in the protagonist's mind. Turning around, he began feeding again, which immediately irritated his mother. Confused and frustrated, she asked what on earth he was doing. With his mouth full of milk, the protagonist suddenly pulled a strange expression, then spat everything right onto his mother's body, leaving her utterly shocked. Disgusted and furious, she screamed at him for making such a mess and tossed him into the air without a second thought. The commotion quickly drew the attention of the boy's grandfather, whose face darkened with rage at the sight. But before the child could hit the ground, his older sister leapt forward. She caught him midair and landed gracefully, holding her little brother carefully in her arms. Checking if he was all right, she asked about his condition, but the boy simply explained that his master plan had only just begun, it was all to save his other sister. Before anyone could respond, our boy father suddenly slapped his wife hard across the face, leaving her stunned. With a mocking tone, he scolded her for being so careless with their son. Enraged, the woman shouted that not even her own parents had ever dared to slap her, and her fury boiled over. Summoning an icy weapon, she charged at her husband with murderous intent. The man defended himself with his own powers, declaring that she needed to be taught a lesson for her arrogance. The children watched in silence as their parents clashed, their abilities colliding violently. But before either side could prevail, a surge of energy burst between them. The grandfather appeared, forcing both combatants to freeze. He glared at them with authority and reminded the mother that her duty was to protect her son, not endanger him. With equal sternness, he told them both they carried the weight of their family's honor. His words forced the couple to calm down. They dismissed their weapons, while the children observed anxiously from a distance. The protagonist's sister turned to him and asked what they should do next. He reassured her not to worry, because they were coming. At that moment, the family's young maid caught a strange sound nearby. The butler quickly informed the grandfather that he had sensed movement from the woods. Everyone stiffened as an eerie presence approached. Emerging from the forest, 3 goblins revealed themselves, their twisted faces filled with strange expressions. From a higher vantage point, the creatures were seen closing in on the family, shrieking wildly as if preparing for battle. But before they could strike, the monsters were ruthlessly skewered by wooden stakes that pierced straight through their bodies. The protagonist's father was stunned, questioning how such creatures could be here when the area was supposed to have already been cleared. The grandfather scolded bitterly, "This is what happens when all you do is cause trouble in taverns instead of studying properly." Just then, the boy's mother began to glow with a deep purple energy. The protagonist explained that their mother's milk essence was attracting demonic beasts, especially stronger ones. As if to confirm his words, the sound of countless goblin footsteps echoed closer, tightening the family's nerves. Soon, a swarm of elite goblins appeared, led by one at peak B rank. Without hesitation, one of the creatures leapt forward, swinging its axe with murderous intent. But the grandfather remained calm, ordering his subordinates to deal with the intruders. Instantly, the family unleashed their elemental powers, clashing against the horde of monsters in a fierce battle. Amid the chaos, the protagonist whispered to his sister that it was their chance to escape. Clutching him tightly, she sprinted toward a nearby cliff. Without hesitation, she leapt off the edge, plummeting rapidly with her brother in her arms. In that moment, her eyes glowed brilliantly as she activated her special ability. Harnessing the power of wind, she began soaring through the skies, carrying her brother away from danger. Amazed, the protagonist asked when she had learned to fly. With a smile, she revealed it was a reward granted by the system. Shocked, he pressed her for details. She cheerfully admitted the task was nothing more than giving her little brother a bath. A brief flashback showed her completing the mission and receiving the rare flight technique as a reward. The protagonist could only fume in disbelief. How could such a trivial task earn such an incredible ability? Meanwhile, on the battlefield, their fiery red-haired sister fought fiercely against a massive serpent, slicing at it with her sword. But another serpent, even larger, suddenly emerged and struck the hunters, shattering their defenses in an instant. With one devastating blow, it hurled a hunter through the air, breaking her guard completely. On the ground, the woman cried out desperately to her captain, declaring they couldn't keep fighting like this. The captain confronted Kuei-shang, demanding to know why he was attacking his own allies. While licking the blood from his hand, the traitor smiled darkly and admitted he only lived for the screams of his victims. When asked who his master was, and reminded that betraying the guild violated the laws, he sneered. To him, laws were nothing but chains for the weak and meaningless rules for commoners. Without warning, he rushed at incredible speed. Instead of striking the captain, he blindsided one of the female hunters, overwhelming her completely. Pleading for her captain to save her, she begged in terror. But the traitor showed no mercy. He hurled her straight into the gaping jaws of the giant serpent. Before everyone's horrified eyes, the beast devoured her whole. The captain, stricken with despair, shouted that the mission had failed and ordered everyone to retreat. Frozen by fear, the red-haired girl trembled, unable to look away from the gruesome sight. Consumed by fury, the captain charged recklessly, vowing to end the traitor's life. He unleashed a fierce strike, but Kuei-shang evaded effortlessly and countered with deadly precision, landing a direct blow. Seeing her leader fall, the young woman called him a monster and tried to stall him by throwing an object. But the rock did nothing, it only tore a piece of his shirt. Mocking them, the villain declared it was their misfortune to encounter him here, for none of them would survive. He lunged at the girl with razor-sharp claws. Surrounded by shards of her broken sword, she braced for death. At the last second, her captain threw himself in front of her, taking the fatal strike in her place. He collapsed lifelessly, and Kuei-shang discarded his body, letting the serpent devour it without hesitation. The girl screamed in despair, helpless as the monstrous serpent consumed her leader. Purple lightning crackled across the beast's body while the traitor fixed his gaze on her. With chilling words, he told her it was a pity, he had wanted to add her to his collection, to turn her into a specimen and display her like a trophy. Blood-stained hand reaching forward, he pressed his palm against her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. In her final moments of desperation, she cried out for her brother, wondering where they were. And then, a massive sword of lightning materialized. A powerful voice declared that they had arrived to save her. The traitor spun and managed to block the strike with his arm. A shockwave of golden energy blasted against his back, but he merely swatted it aside with a snarl. The girl's eyes widened in shock, and with trembling lips, she called out her sister's name. Just then, the protagonist and his sister landed firmly on the ground, prepared for battle. The girl immediately recognized his former appearance and called out to him as her brother. He assured her that explanations would come later. For now, they had far more urgent matters to deal with. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl stood frozen, staring at him with a bewildered expression, silently asking herself what on earth was happening. Turning his gaze toward the serpent, the protagonist quickly realized that the beast had undergone an evolution by devouring awakeners, a phenomenon unheard of until now. At the same time, the traitorous villain began to tremble violently as golden energy swirled furiously around him. With a surge of power, he shattered the restraints that had been holding him back, breaking free in an instant. His eyes narrowed, and he sneered mockingly, asking if it wasn't the young master standing before him with nothing more than his little servant girl. And so, the three siblings found themselves standing side by side, ready to face their opponent head-on. Confused, the red-haired girl demanded to know how they even knew about her, and why they had brought the younger girl with them. But the villain brushed off her question entirely, his mind already calculating how best to exploit the situation. The protagonist, watching carefully, realized that this was no mindless brute, his enemy was cunning. With a sinister grin, the man revealed his intentions, to turn the servant girl into an empty puppet and deliver the protagonist directly to his master. The battlefield bore silent witness to his cruelty. Several hunters lay defeated, their bodies pierced by glowing red weapons hovering in the air. It became clear, the villain wielded a rare metal-type power, allowing him to forge weapons from his own energy and merge them seamlessly with his body. The protagonist's sharp eyes studied their aura levels, and he immediately understood the truth: the gap between their strength and the enemy's was vast, almost insurmountable. But then, a spark of determination lit up in his mind. His eyes gleamed as he turned to his sisters, instructing them to listen carefully and follow his lead. On the other side, the villain exuded a chilling energy, preparing to strike. Without warning, he lunged forward with terrifying speed, claws slashing straight toward the protagonist. His sisters leapt back instinctively, giving him space. In that moment, the protagonist activated his divine awakening. Lightning roared to life around him as brilliant yellow energy exploded outward, his body radiating overwhelming power. The protagonist unleashed his lightning power, moving at blinding speed to evade the villain's strikes. The enemy froze for a moment, his eyes widening. He recognized the technique. It was a forbidden move, one he had seen before. Memories surged back to him, recalling a past battle where he fought and defeated someone who wielded that very same ability. In that instant, realization struck: this child before him was connected to his past opponent. Bursting into laughter, he marveled at the unbelievable coincidence. But the protagonist's small, child-sized body could not endure the immense strain of such divine power. His movements faltered, and he knew he had only one chance left. Summoning all his strength, he shouted his sisters' names to signal the real plan. Hearing the noise, the villain turned his head toward the sound. At that moment, the red-haired sister appeared, hefting a massive boulder over her head. Without hesitation, she hurled it at him with all her might. The giant rock crashed down, but the enemy easily dodged, letting it smash into the ground and shatter violently. Then, a strange noise drew his attention. A streak of green energy raced swiftly across the ground. Alarmed, the villain shifted to full alert as the energy surged closer. Suddenly, a furious storm of dust and wind erupted before him. The whirlwind grew into a raging tornado, created by the white-haired sister with her wind ability. Even while caught in the storm, the adversary sneered. "These are nothing but cheap tricks," he mocked. That brief distraction was all the protagonist needed. Focusing every ounce of his divine lightning, he forged a spear crackling with unstoppable energy. Pouring his strength into a martial arts technique, he hurled the weapon forward with everything he had. The villain spun around in shock, cursing the boy's cunning as the spear struck him square in the head. The lightning pierced clean through. The sheer force triggered a massive explosion, leaving a trail of devastation across the forest. But the price was heavy. The protagonist collapsed to the ground, his body unable to handle the recoil. His sister immediately scolded him, furious at his recklessness, while both girls hovered anxiously over him, terrified for his condition. Yet, even while injured, the villain grinned darkly. He muttered that it didn't matter, he would still protect the young master by finishing off the two little girls. With a sadistic smile, he drew a razor-sharp blade and charged forward at terrifying speed. The servant girl cried out a warning and leapt in front of the red-haired sister, shielding her from the incoming strike. The villain's blow landed with crushing force, slamming her body against a tree. Turning his eyes back to the redhead, the man smirked. "Don't worry, your turn is next." His arms twisted and morphed into gleaming blades. He launched them toward the girl, pinning her down with deadly precision. Leaning closer, he taunted her. She would make perfect bait for his plans. But before the killing strike could land, a bolt of yellow lightning crackled into existence, deflecting the attack at the very last second. Snarling, the villain shifted his aim back toward the fallen protagonist. Raising a small dagger, he lunged downward. The weapon pierced deep into the boy's back, sending him sprawling helplessly across the ground. The red-haired sister watched in horror, her heart shattering as her brother was struck down before her eyes. The red-haired girl finally broke free of the villain's grip, scooped up her injured brother. The enemy clenched his fist, sneering and asking why the boy was in such a rush to meet his end. But the protagonist, weak and bleeding, managed to retort that it was actually the villain who was about to be taken down. Blood dripping from his eye, the adversary roared with fury at the child's insolence. Suddenly, a commanding voice thundered from above, calling him an ungrateful mutt for daring to attack his master. It was the protagonist's grandfather, descending from the sky, eyes blazing with rage. At once, the villain realized the truth, that the earlier lightning spear had not only been an attack but also a clever signal to summon the family. Smirking, the protagonist confirmed it had all been part of his plan. A flashback revealed what had happened moments earlier. When the family arrived at the scene and noticed the children were missing, the butler reported that the young master and the servant girl had vanished. The father grumbled that his son could already walk. Our boy grandfather barked orders at his men to track them down immediately. Just then, they spotted the brilliant trail of light from the protagonist's earlier attack. Without hesitation, the grandfather ignited his lightning power and shot forward at full speed, racing straight toward the signal. Now, arriving at the battlefield, the grandfather instantly sized up the situation. The villain's confidence cracked, panic flashing across his face. His only chance was to seize the protagonist as a hostage. With desperate speed, he lunged at the siblings. But before he could reach them, the red-haired sister stepped up, summoning a staff to protect her brother. With a forceful strike, she blasted the villain back, catching him completely off guard. Stunned, the man glared at her with seething rage. Then, out of nowhere, the protagonist's father appeared, his fury directed at the traitor. He spat that the villain was useless, a complete failure. Without hesitation, he launched a devastating attack. The villain scrambled to flee, shouting that none of this was his fault. But before he could escape, one of the forest's massive beasts cornered him. With no room to run, the creature tore into him mercilessly, leaving him no chance to survive. Yet the battle was far from over. The colossal serpent began to mutate, transforming into a radiant golden monstrosity. The butler rushed to the children's side, checking on the protagonist and assuring the others that he was still alive despite his injuries. The grandfather praised the girls for their courage and declared that the serpent had ripened into the perfect moment for them to claim its rare treasure. But in that instant, the realization struck him: these noble families had been deliberately using innocent civilians as fodder, sacrificing them to evolve these terrifying beasts. Resolute, the grandfather and his son prepared themselves to confront the golden serpent. Their clash ignited a cataclysmic explosion of crimson energy, ripping through the forest in a deafening blast. Out of the smoke, two shadowed figures emerged, while the children huddled at a safe distance, watching with wide, fearful eyes. Right after that, the grandfather and the father step forward, with the treasure from mighty golden beast that had just defeated. The old man smirks, remarking that today's harvest had turned out far richer than he ever imagined. Without wasting time, he orders the butler to escort the two girls and gather the leftover materials for the warehouse. In his mind, the scheming elder is already plotting, mixing worthless scraps with decent items to sell cheaply to average hunters, while keeping the high-grade treasures aside to bleed the elite squads dry with outrageous prices. He then passes the venom sac to his son, telling him to use it as a bargaining chip to forge powerful new connections. The father accepts with a sly grin etched across his face. Next, the grandfather hands over the silver serpent's horn, instructing that it be sent to the auction house, while declaring that the scales will be crafted into protective treasures for his beloved grandson. Hearing all this, the young protagonist can only stare in confusion, unable to grasp the twisted way his family handles things. The butler bows deeply, pledging to carry out his master's commands without fail. But then, the boy's father steps in, asking his father to hand him the Snake King's essence. The old man scowls in annoyance, muttering that his son already has a fine wife capable of providing him with limitless powerful essence. At that very moment, the protagonist's mother approaches, thinking, "Am I nothing more than a tool to them?" From behind, the protagonist and his sisters quietly observe the tense scene unfold. The father's eyes widen in shock before his gaze lowers, lingering on his wife's essence. His expression twists with anger, his thoughts darkening: "She'll never hand it over to me easily." Then his eyes shift toward his son. To be met with the protagonist's sharp glare, as if declaring without words, "I will never share my milk with anyone." Then, without hesitation, the grandfather tosses the snake essence toward the butler. Catching it effortlessly, the butler is awestruck by the overwhelming power radiating from the sphere. The family head calmly states that his butler's eldest son is currently evolving, and this essence will prove useful for him. Dropping to one knee, the loyal servant thanks his master with reverence, vowing eternal devotion to the clan. Days later, the scene shifts to the Grand Luklon mansion beneath a star-strewn sky. Inside, the young protagonist sits in his room, holding a mysterious pendant. One of his sisters enters and informs him that Xuang has now been assigned as his maid as well. Almost on cue, the two girls appear before him in crisp-made uniforms, smiling warmly at their brother. Looking back down at the pendant, a system prompt flashes before his eyes, confirming he has received a rank A defensive treasure. Noticing his expression, one of the girls asks with worry if something is wrong. But before she can press further, the boy's eyes spark with lightning. Channeling his ability, he unleashes a surge of yellow energy straight into the pendant. A brilliant blast erupts from his room, shooting out through the window into the night sky. Both sisters gape in disbelief, stunned by the sheer force their brother just displayed. And yet, when the glow fades, the pendant remains pristine, without a single scratch. The boy clenches it in his hand, deep in thought. This small test proves what he suspected all along, that beasts can evolve by devouring awakened humans. It also confirms the ugly truth: the noble families deliberately use ordinary people as bait, exploiting them to harvest rare resources and exclusive gear, while pretending to be their protectors. The very lessons taught at the academy are nothing but lies. Furious at this hypocrisy, the protagonist tightens his fists, eyes burning with determination. The two sisters glance at their younger brother and ask if information is really that important. Turning serious, the protagonist explains that he has only now begun to realize just how dangerous ignorance can be. Gently cupping his sister's face, he tells them that from this point onward, they must rely on the Liu family's influence to gather intelligence. With resolute expressions, both girls nod and agree to follow his lead. Moments later, he shifts the conversation and asks Xuang why she had been traveling with that so-called divine team. She hesitates, unable to answer right away. The other sister presses further, voicing her own question: why is Xuang's power so unusually strong? The red-haired girl falls silent, unable to respond, while the younger one just stares at her with unblinking intensity. The protagonist then mentions another name, Sansan. At the sound of it, Shuang freezes, her entire body tense. Tears well up in her eyes, and she struggles to explain what happened to their missing sister. Overcome by grief, she collapses onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Before her cries can draw attention, the boy quickly covers her mouth and warns her to keep quiet. Once she calms down a little, she sits on the edge of the bed, still trembling, and begins to recount the painful memory. She explains that on the day their sister disappeared, she had gone out searching for their brother and never returned. The scene shifts into a flashback. Little Shuang sits alone, staring longingly at a piece of cake, her hand reaching toward the cherry on top. Her sad eyes reflect how much she misses her siblings, waiting for them to come home. Finally, she decides to go look for them herself. She wanders through the dark, empty house, softly calling out Sansan's name. Fear creeps in as she races down a shadowy hallway, begging her younger sister to stop hiding and come out. Back in the present, the protagonist is stunned to hear that Sansan had actually run away from home. Shuang continues, explaining that from the rooftop she witnessed something terrifying. The beast tide wasn't a natural disaster at all, but the work of a malicious person. Her memory shows her frantically darting across rooftops, desperately calling out Sansan's name. At one point, she pounds on a locked door, pleading for her little sister to escape quickly. But then, her face twists into pure terror as she glances to the side, realizing she isn't alone. Up on the rooftop, Shuang caught sight of a strange figure standing beneath the full moon. The man's face was shrouded in darkness, but his piercing red eyes glowed ominously. Raising a staff that radiated with power, he struck it hard against the ground. In an instant, a massive wave of energy rippled outward. A gigantic crimson magic circle appeared beneath him, its eerie glow lighting up the night. From its core, a brilliant beam of red light shot skyward, tearing a rift open in the heavens. What emerged was terrifying, a colossal reptilian eye staring down through the portal. Shuang froze in terror as the swirling red gateway expanded, and from its depths poured out wave after wave of demonic beasts. Her memory shows her standing helplessly as monstrous creatures swarmed the city, destroying everything in sight. Among them was a savage demon wolf that began hunting her down. Just when escape seemed impossible, a glowing panel appeared before her eyes. The system had chosen her. It declared that she had awakened a divine body cultivation ability. Following its guidance, she made a desperate leap, soaring across rooftops in a way she had never done before. That leap saved her life. Back in the present, Shuang explains how she ran endlessly until finally encountering the subjugation team that took her in. Hearing her story, the protagonist is left speechless. Another system, another miraculous awakening. He then suggests that if each of them has received a system, then maybe Sansan does too, and if that's true, she could still be alive somewhere. The boy nods, declaring that they'll use the Lu family's influence to search for any trace of their missing sister. Just then, Shuang hesitantly admits she was given a new task by her system, and it came with a reward. Without warning, she sweeps up her brother into her arms. The protagonist's eyes widen in panic, instantly reminded of what happened the last time. His sisters, however, are delighted. Laughing as they rush off, they explain the system's new mission: give their younger brother a bath. After that, the two sisters drag the protagonist into the washing area for a bath. The red-haired sister lifted him high into the air, teasing that this was what a little elephant looked like, while the poor boy screamed in embarrassment. Off to the side, the white-haired sister couldn't stop laughing at the scene. But then, the redhead suddenly came up with a mischievous idea to stop her brother from protesting any further. With a wicked grin, she flicked his elephant. A sharp jolt of pain shot through the protagonist's body, leaving him speechless and humiliated. Moments later, he sat in the bathtub, sulking and crying on the inside while the sisters carefully washed him, smiling all the while. Soon, they joined him in the tub, splashing around and playing with the water as he slowly relaxed. After the bath, the sisters hugged him tightly, praising what a good little boy he had been. But the protagonist snapped back, grumbling that they had changed. All of a sudden, the red-haired sister froze in place, her cheerful expression vanishing and being replaced by one of pure dread. The protagonist immediately noticed her reaction and asked anxiously what was wrong. With a trembling finger, she pointed ahead, her voice shaking as she revealed that the beast tide had been caused by that man. The revelation left both the protagonist and his other sister stunned. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, the butler was walking alongside a stern man with a scar across his face. The camera zooms in to show his cold, intimidating gaze. In a flashback, the red-haired girl remembered seeing the same man on a rooftop the night the beast tide began. In her memory, he raised his staff, conjured a massive glowing magic circle, and tore the sky open. From that rift emerged a giant reptilian eye that filled her with terror. Snapping back to the present, the protagonist boldly declared that he was the son of the future family head, telling his sisters not to panic. With that, the three of them continued down the hallway. As the two men walked past them, the protagonist glared with sharp suspicion. His red-haired sister, however, trembled with fear, unable to hide her reaction. The scarred man noticed her unease but said nothing. Forcing nervous smiles, the sisters greeted the butler politely. The butler then bowed respectfully to the protagonist, addressing him as young Master Wang. The boy's expression hardened as he silently watched the two men walk further down the corridor. Soon, they reached a heavy wooden door. The butler announced that Zhou King had returned to meet with the master of the house. Realizing it was the meeting chamber, the protagonist decided to eavesdrop. His sister worried aloud that they might get caught, but he reassured her with calm confidence, hinting that he already had a plan. With quiet determination, the siblings crept closer to the door, ready to listen in. The protagonist suddenly pushes the door open, barging into the meeting room with his sisters right behind him. His sister shouts that he's not allowed to enter, but it's already too late. Inside, his grandfather sits calmly at his desk, with the butler and the scar-faced man standing before him. All three turn their heads in surprise at the unexpected intrusion. The sisters immediately bow and apologize, explaining nervously that they tried to stop the young master but couldn't hold him back. The boy, however, pays no attention to their words. Instead, he runs straight toward the desk with his arms wide open, calling out for his grandfather. Smiling warmly, the head of the Liu family waves his hand, dismissing the girls from the room, and invites his grandson over. Pulling the boy onto his lap, he begins speaking proudly about the strength and influence of their family. His expression then turns serious as he asks about the recent beast tides. The butler and the scarred man stand at attention, listening carefully. The scarred man reports that new clusters of beasts have already been located and could strike at any moment. Hearing this, the protagonist's face twists with anger. In that instant, he realizes the academy has been deceiving everyone, lying about the tides being natural disasters while sending students straight into life-threatening danger. A flashback plays in his mind of a teacher claiming the beast tides are natural occurrences, insisting that the awakened exist to protect the weak. Snapping back to the meeting, the butler announces that he has already arranged for the guild to post high-paying missions. The promise of rich rewards will draw countless teams straight into the trap. The grandfather praises him, reminding everyone that the butler's family has loyally served the Liu family for 3 generations. With a satisfied nod, he adds that he is very pleased with his service. At that moment, the butler signals discreetly to the scar-faced man, who instantly understands. Dropping to one knee, the man pledges his loyalty, declaring it an honor to work for the Liu family. The butler then expresses gratitude for the master's generosity, thanking him for the gift that allowed his son to reach peak B rank. The family head smiles, ordering both men to move forward with the beast tide plan exactly as arranged. The scarred man remains kneeling, accepting the command without hesitation. But the grandfather doesn't stop there. He also orders preparations for expensive equipment and lavish entertainment to be made ready for the survivors. A quick flashback shows a younger version of the family head lounging in a hot spring, surrounded by women, while a maid secretly watches from the shadows. Bowing deeply, the butler accepts every command without question. As night falls, the Grand Liu family mansion glows beneath the moonlight. Back in their private room, the protagonist explains the family's cruel scheme to his sisters. He reveals how the Liu family manipulates the beast tides, opening portals, using ordinary people as bait, and sending awakened ones to fight. In doing so, they collect mountains of valuable resources for themselves. His sister, horrified, demands to know how they can be so heartless, asking if those people aren't considered human. With a grim look, the protagonist replies that in the eyes of the nobles, they themselves are the only true humans. Everyone else? Nothing more than livestock. The red-haired sister suggests exposing the Liu family scheme to everyone, but the protagonist quickly shuts that idea down. He explains that even if they told the truth, nobody would believe them. That answer leaves both girls uneasy, and they turn to their younger brother, asking what they should do instead. With a determined look, the boy declares that they're going to crush the Liu family's lackeys and put an end to the beast tide themselves. He motions for his sisters to come closer, and the two lean in as he begins to whisper. The protagonist carefully lays out his plan while they listen with full attention. After explaining everything, he asks if they understood. The girls nod, but their expressions are still tense as they question whether they can really overcome such powerful enemies. Confidently, the protagonist reminds them that they still have 3 weeks to prepare. The plan will begin at the end of the month. Raising his baby bottle, he insists they'll need to grow stronger before then. His sister stares at him, confused about what he means, but in that moment, he and the white-haired girl exchange a knowing glance. Without hesitation, he sticks the bottle into the redhead's mouth, catching her completely off guard. She swallows the milk, and instantly, her eyes widen as she feels her power soaring without any training. The protagonist grins, then runs off saying he's going to grab a bite to eat, too. While the sisters finish the rest of the milk, their mother is seen meditating peacefully, until her son suddenly barges in. With an exasperated sigh, she scolds him, calling him a greedy little brat whose appetite never seems to end. 3 weeks later, the protagonist studies a glowing system screen, wondering if he's reached his limit. A new notification appears, informing him of a fresh skill. He mutters in disbelief, questioning if he's about to be turned into a host. For a moment, he even considers whether recovering his strength would mean going through another 9 months in the womb. But then he realizes this new skill isn't just about survival, it can also be used as a deadly weapon. The system shows him an illustration, revealing how the technique can be unleashed directly against his enemies. Then the door creaks open, and suddenly, both sisters step inside, their expressions sharp and determined, ready to begin the plan. Gathered together in their room, the three siblings quietly discuss how to handle the incoming threat. But the white-haired sister leans forward and lowers her voice, revealing that she's already done some digging on the man named Jo Chun. According to the gossip she picked up from the maids, he's a divine awakening master and one of the top graduates from his academy. Before they can say more, another maid nervously interrupts, warning them to keep their voices down. That man is not someone they should talk about openly. Ignoring the warning, the red-haired sister joins in, her tone serious. She's also found something out. Jo Chun has received a highly condensed life essence from the Lord himself, pushing him all the way to the peak of B rank. Hearing that, the youngest sister's face turns pale. That means he's far stronger than the last enemy they barely managed to defeat. The protagonist takes a deep breath and thinks through their situation. His own strength has only just reached the initial stage of C rank, and even though Shuang managed to hit peak D rank in just 3 weeks, together they still don't stand a real chance. But the red-haired girl suddenly lights up with excitement. She tells them not to worry, because after bathing him, she awakened a brand new skill. Another sisters instantly perk up, curious about what kind of power she discovered. With a dramatic grin, she crosses her arms and announces that her new ability has an incredible name. She strikes a bold pose and shouts it proudly, Blue Thirsty Rush. Her white-haired sister gasps, impressed by the name alone, while the protagonist just looks slightly embarrassed by her enthusiasm. Still, the redhead continues, explaining that her new technique multiplies her strength by 5 for 30 seconds. With that power, she boasts, one punch could easily send their opponent flying across the planet. Fired up, she starts shadowboxing, throwing punches in the air as her sister claps in admiration. Watching them, the protagonist can't help but smirk. He already has a plan forming in his mind, but part of him still wonders why the system rewards them with such powerful skills every time they bathe him. Even so, a hint of worry lingers, their combined power still might not be enough to handle this new threat. Noticing his unease, the red-haired sister tilts her head and asks what kind of information he managed to dig up for their plan. The boy grins mischievously. He explains that his information is crucial. The enemy plans to move in the city at exactly 1 in the morning. The others freeze as he continues, recalling how he overheard a man with a scar whispering to their grandfather that everything was prepared for the 1 a.m. strike. The red-haired sister's eyes widen in disbelief. Panic instantly sets in when she realizes that's the exact location of her Divine Awakening group's base. Her face twists with fear as she yells that the commander is in danger. Without hesitation, she turns to run and warn them, but before she can take a step, the protagonist comes front of her. A spark of lightning crackles from his body, holding her in place. He tells her firmly not to rush, there's still time to act, but they must move smart. With determination in his eyes, he assures them he already has a plan to take down Jo Chun. Both sisters gasp and lean in closer, asking eagerly if he truly has won. The boy gives a confident grin, lowering his voice as he begins to whisper the details of his strategy. Every word drips with calm certainty. When he finishes, he clenches his fist and declares that tonight, they'll bring down Jo Chun once and for all. Both sisters nod in agreement, their resolve shining as they prepare for the mission ahead. As night descends, the full moon casts a cold glow over the city. The clock strikes midnight, the moment of truth is near. Dressed in black gear and masks, the 3 siblings stand ready. Someone reminds the group about the enemy's ability, a devastating technique known as Divine Whip. It allows Jo Chun to morph his arms into flexible whips infused with body enhancement energy, strong enough to shatter even the most durable metal armor. With no time to waste, the trio leaps from a rooftop, soaring through the air as the moonlight follows their descent. The city lights flickering far below. One of them spots a faint signal and reports that the target is inside. The white-haired sister smirks, thanking their allies from the pomegranate group for the intel. It saved them precious time. That's their mark. With practiced precision, the 3 siblings scale the windows of the building, moving like shadows against the wall. Once close enough, they slip behind a corner and peek out carefully, eyes locked on the enemy waiting inside. On the rooftop, the enemy stands tall, gripping a staff that pulses with a sinister red glow. One of the sisters clenches her fists, ready to strike, but the protagonist quickly stops her with a calm hand gesture. He tells her to hold back and wait for the right moment. The man then raises his weapon, channeling an immense surge of power. Red lightning crackles violently around the staff, the air humming with dangerous energy as he prepares to unleash his monster attack. That's when the protagonist spots an opening. He shouts for his sisters to move, now. In an instant, the red-haired sister slams her fist into the rooftop, the ground trembling beneath her strength. Chunks of concrete burst upward, and she rips one massive slab free. With a fierce yell, she hurls it straight toward the enemy. The rock soars through the air and clips his cheek before crashing into the wall behind him, shattering it to pieces. The villain freezes for a moment. Rage flares in his eyes as he roars, demanding to know who would attack him so boldly. He turns toward the hole in the wall, but before he can react, the white-haired sister seizes the moment and snatches the glowing staff right from his grasp. The man twisted with disbelief. Energy surges through his arm as it transforms into a glowing whip, the signature mark of his divine ability. With a sharp flick, his elongated arm lashes out toward the girl like a red streak in the air. But she's faster than he expected. With a spin, she kicks the attack aside and uses the stolen staff as leverage, vaulting backward out of his reach. Then, with a burst of strength, she hurls the weapon across the rooftop, sending it flying far from the enemy. The villain's eyes widen in horror as his precious staff tumbles away. He quickly stretches out his whip arm again, desperate to reel it back in. But before he can, the night sky flashes, an intense yellow bolt of lightning rips through the air, striking straight toward him. His face twists in panic, realizing he has no time to dodge. The bolt hits with full force, followed by a thunderous explosion that rocks the entire rooftop. The protagonist narrows his eyes through the haze and calls out that the attack landed perfectly. The protagonist and his sisters stare in disbelief as the smoke clears. Their eyes widen. The villain is still standing, burned, furious, but very much alive. He sneers through the pain, his voice dripping with rage as he vows to make them regret ever crossing him. Before anyone can react, the enemy lunges forward with explosive speed, his red energy crackling through the night air. The protagonist instantly slides back, barking an order to his sisters to switch to Plan B. Without hesitation, the white-haired sister grips the enemy's stolen weapon and starts spinning it with incredible force. Then, with perfect timing, she hurls it across the rooftop. The protagonist catches the glowing staff midair just as the red-haired sister clashes head-on with the raging enemy. Their auras explode upon contact, her fierce blue energy colliding with his red lightning in a violent burst of power. While the rooftop trembles from their clash, the protagonist and his sisters leap back into the fray. Their real mission begins now. The red-haired girl roars with determination, meeting the villain's strength head-on. Their blows echo like thunder as sparks fly from every impact. The man grits his teeth, shocked that these kids can match his power so effortlessly. Who in the world are they? He mutters in disbelief. The protagonist raises the red scepter high. He focuses his energy, summoning something far greater than before. The air crackles, and suddenly, a colossal bolt of lightning tears down from the heavens, shaking the entire city. The traitor's jaw drops. He can barely comprehend what he's witnessing. What kind of insane ability is that? He shouts in shock. But before he gets an answer, a red portal opens, swirling violently as demonic claws reach out from within, grasping for anything nearby. Sensing the danger, the protagonist's instincts kick in. He screams for everyone to retreat, his voice filled with urgency. Get back! Now! The red-haired girl and shoves her away from the chaos, sending her rolling safely to the side. And in a split second of chaos, the protagonist does something completely unexpected. He throws a baby bottle straight at the henchman. The man reflexively blocks it, but the moment it makes contact, the bottle explodes. He's instantly soaked his hand in milk. Kwang freezes, blinking in confusion. What was that? Then suddenly, a crimson beast suddenly emerged, and the villain burst into laughter, mocking the others for unknowingly helping him complete his mission like fools. But high above, a faint yellow glow began to illuminate the sky, catching the traitor's attention. In the next instant, a beam of golden energy shot down, yet Kwang easily flung the creature aside, unfazed. Smirking, he announced that since they had helped him finish his mission, he would now take his leave. But as he stepped forward, Kwang suddenly realized something was wrong. He had walked straight into a trap. From every direction, arrows made of blue energy whizzed through the air, while a pack of red wolves came charging toward him. Scoffing, the traitor mocked their attempt, asking if they truly thought such petty attacks could stop him. While he dodged the arrows, the wolves lunged, forcing him into a frantic defense. Our protagonist stood calmly nearby, watching as the henchman prepared for a direct strike. The two sisters behind him looked anxious and afraid. Kwang then dashed forward at incredible speed, the wolves racing close behind him. He jumped straight upside Hero, laughing as he taunted that such a weak trick wouldn't fool him. He believed that he had led the wolves toward protagonist. No, he is safe. The sisters screamed, calling out in panic for their brother, fearing he was about to be torn apart by the beasts. But our protagonist shouted for them to stay back and not to interfere. Hearing the boy's voice, the villain froze for a moment, puzzled by the strange sense of familiarity. His expression shifted as he turned toward the young man, trying to place where he had heard that voice before. And then, realization struck. Shock filled the traitor's eyes as he finally recognized who the boy was. In that instant, the wolves changed their target, ignoring the protagonist entirely and leaping straight toward Kwang. The traitor screamed in confusion and fury, demanding to know why the wolves were attacking only him and not the protagonist. The guy quickly conjured a shield using his hand, surrounding himself in a shimmering barrier as the wolves charged. Snarling and snapping, they pounced from every direction, their claws and fangs clashing against his defenses. He fought back fiercely, striking with bursts of power, but there were simply too many of them. The battle grew more chaotic with every passing second until, at last, the monsters overwhelmed him. The mighty traitor was dragged down beneath the swarm. Nearby, the small protagonist gripped his scepter and pulled it from the ground. In that instant, the red lightning that had filled the sky faded away. When the dust settled, nothing remained of Kwang but his scattered remains, left behind for the wolves to devour. The sisters rushed over, calling out in worry as they found their brother utterly drained from the fight. But before they could catch their breath, the red wolves slowly turned their glowing eyes toward the boy. Without hesitation, the two sisters stepped in front of him, shielding him with their own bodies. But suddenly they heard someone voice saying them to take rest and leave the rest to them. The sister in red shouted with excitement, calling out for the vice captain, who had just arrived. From above, a woman with flowing purple hair descended with her squad, ready for battle. Seeing reinforcements arrive, the boy let out a weary sigh of relief, saying the mission was finally over, and they could go home. The following day, inside a grand mansion, angry shouts echoed through the hall. An elderly man, our boy's grandfather, stood trembling with rage, while a servant knelt before him, crying and begging for forgiveness. The servant choked out that they had failed their duties. The old man slammed his hand against the armrest, furious that his son had ruined everything at such a crucial moment. The butler stepped forward cautiously, urging the master to calm down and promising to investigate the matter thoroughly and report back with the truth. The old man took a deep breath, his hand still shaking, and though his anger seemed to subside slightly, his expression remained grim. In a cold, bitter tone, he declared that the Liu family would avenge his son's downfall, and that he would never forgive the traitor responsible. The servant bowed deeply, thanking the master and vowing to uncover whoever was behind the attack. Just then, the door opened, and a woman stepped inside, calling out to the butler who was still kneeling on the floor. It was the protagonist's mother. She complained that the baby had been hungrier than usual and mentioned she had planned to go shopping but he was not letting her go anywhere. Grandpa chuckled warmly, saying it was only natural for the boy to have a bigger appetite, after all, he was growing fast. With pride in his voice, he added that the child represented the future hope of both families. He then mentioned that several noble families had already come forward, proposing marriage arrangements for the little boy. The mother was taken aback, surprised that her son had already become so popular among the families. Grandpa explained that the boy's reputation had spread quickly and that he needed to handle these proposals before things got out of hand. Hearing this, the young main character was completely stunned, wondering what kind of strange marriage schemes the old man was talking about. Few minutes later, protagonist explained everything to his sisters. They froze in disbelief after learning about their brother's possible engagement. When the little boy closed his eyes and nodded, confirming that it was true, both girls looked uneasy. The white-haired sister frowned and asked if he really intended to marry the descendants of those bad people. Smiling softly, the boy reassured them that he'd never leave their side and that he had no interest in those spoiled brats anyway. Hearing his words, both sisters smiled with relief, their worries fading away. Outside the mansion, carriages began to arrive one after another as noble families came bearing lavish gifts for the engagement. Inside, the butler hurried to organize the preparations, giving out instructions to ensure everything went perfectly. Meanwhile, the boy's mother sighed in frustration, complaining to the old man that the butler could have managed everything without involving her. But Grandpa shook his head and said his useless son was incapable of handling such matters, so it was time for her to learn what it meant to be the matriarch of the family. At that moment, a maid came hurrying down the hallway toward the butler. The young woman leaned close and whispered something in his ear, her tone urgent. Without wasting a second, the butler made his way to the old master, who sat calmly in his chair. Bending down, the butler quietly relayed the news he had just received. The grandfather's expression shifted instantly, his playful mood vanished, replaced by a look of deep thought. After a brief pause, he rose to his feet and instructed his daughter-in-law to join him for the engagement discussion. Moments later, the boy's mother entered the room, carrying the little one in her arms. The butler stepped forward and announced that a sealed letter had arrived, from the second young master, sent directly from the imperial capital. With a grave look, the family head accepted the envelope, studying the royal seal carefully. Then, he passed it to his daughter-in-law, who still had the child resting in her lap. As she held the letter, our tiny protagonist watched curiously. In his mind, he thought to himself that sealed letters were how noble families exchanged important and confidential information. Reaching out with small hands, he babbled and reached for it, his little baby noises filling the room. From what he gathered, the higher-ups were planning to take action against the Ling family, but honestly, the little guy couldn't care less. All he wanted at that moment was his next meal. He lunged toward his mother, eager for more milk. She screamed and told him to slow down, holding him in her arms. Ignoring the playful scene, the elder turned back to his daughter-in-law and asked for her opinion on the letter's contents. She furrowed her brow, wondering aloud why the higher-ups were suddenly targeting the Ling family, especially when that clan was already in decline. The old master gave a knowing smile. He explained that the Ling family had made a costly mistake, and now, their businesses were ripe for the taking. The old master then gave a firm order that the Ling family's marriage proposal delegation was not to return under any circumstance. Few minutes later, in another room, the young protagonist was seen handing his milk bottle to his red-haired sister. Just as she took it, their other sister suddenly burst through the door, shouting for both of them. Startled, the redhead flinched, sending the bottle flying as milk splashed out. Without missing a beat, the protagonist snatched the bottle from her and quickly shoved it into his other sister's mouth. With a serious tone, he asked why she was so worked up and told her to drink some milk to calm down. The white-haired girl obediently took a sip, her expression softening as she drank contentedly. After catching her breath, she handed the bottle back to her brother and said she had just seen their other sister Sansan. The boy's eyes widened in shock as he asked where she was. His sister explained that she'd seen her at the Ling family's marriage proposal gathering. The scene then shifted to a flashback. The older sister, who had been serving at the event, saw the Ling family's carriage pull up at the venue. Inside the carriage Sansan, dressed in a maid's uniform. Back in the present, our protagonist froze upon hearing the Ling family's name. His reaction immediately caught his sister's attention. Both of them looked at him in confusion, asking what was wrong. Clenching his tiny fists, the boy shouted that the Lu family was preparing to crush the Ling family and that Sansan was in danger. In a panic, he yelled for his sisters to find a way to get her out of there. He tried to make a run for it himself, but before he could reach the door, his mother appeared and blocked his path. With a stern look, she asked where he thought he was going again this time. Before he could protest, she scooped him up in her arms, reminding him that his grandfather had ordered his presence at the family meeting. Struggling was useless, she carried him off while his two sisters stood frozen, worry written across their faces. The red-haired girl anxiously asked what they should do now. The white-haired sister took a deep breath and said they needed to think of a plan first. Just then, another maid appeared in the doorway and called for the two girls, saying the butler needed their help with the event preparations. The sisters exchanged uneasy glances, knowing they'd have to act carefully. The two young women reluctantly agreed to help, though unease lingered in their hearts. Meanwhile, in the grand hall, the family head stood before the gathered nobles. With a courteous smile, he thanked all the visiting families for attending and announced that only 3 young ladies had been found suitable for his grandson. At his words, the representatives of the 3 chosen families stepped forward and bowed deeply, honored by the opportunity to form such a prestigious union. The elder then declared that true skill was what mattered most, and the young lady who triumphed in a special test would earn the right to marry his grandson. Our little protagonist blinked in confusion, having no idea what kind of test his grandfather was talking about. As the names of the families were announced, the Nong, the Gong, and the Ling family, his eyes widened. The old man frowned when the Ling family's name came up, muttering that they had the audacity to send the daughter of a concubine. His glare hardened, filled with disdain, but inwardly, he admitted he had only allowed them to participate to keep their attention diverted. The boy began to grow nervous, realizing that the only people he could truly rely on were his 2 sisters. Seeking comfort, he buried his face against his mother's chest drinking milk. She snapped at him in frustration, scolding him for being clingy. The grandfather looked at the scene, telling her to let the boy drink as much as he wanted since his growth was extraordinary. He added with pride that once the boy matured and was tested in the imperial capital, all the credit would go to her. Exhausted and exasperated, the mother sighed, complaining that her son was a little troublemaker who never seemed to get enough. Few hours later, the butler quietly entered a dimly lit room, where the head of the family sat alone in contemplation. Bowing respectfully, the servant reported that the Ling girl would perish during the upcoming test and that her entire entourage would be wiped out. A cruel smile spread across the old man's face as he nodded, clearly pleased. "Excellent," he said, his tone brimming with satisfaction. Unbeknownst to them, our young hero had overheard every word. Panic surged through his small body as he realized the danger Sansan was in. His heart raced, and thoughts of his sister filled his mind. Meanwhile, his sisters were rushing through the mansion's corridors, one carrying a tray of fruit, the other running late with an armful of supplies. Both were overworked and frustrated, muttering that they barely had time to breathe, let alone sneak away. As they passed each other in the hall, their eyes met, both filled with worry and fear for their friend. Neither had a plan yet, but both knew they had to act fast. The scene then shifted to the Lu family's private arena, a massive stone coliseum surrounded by towering walls. The stage was set for the so-called test. Inside the Lu family's private viewing box, the grandfather sat beside his daughter-in-law, who held the young boy in her arms. The butler stood nearby, ready to announce the proceedings. He then called for the first participant, the young lady representing the Nangong family. All eyes turned toward the grand entrance as the first contender stepped into view. Dressed in an elegant Gothic gown, the Nangong girl made her way into the arena with confident grace. Watching from above, the old master nodded approvingly. He praised her composure, remarking that she was both beautiful and skilled in the art of combat. However, the boy's mother looked unimpressed. With a faint shrug, she commented that appearances didn't matter much to her. The elder chuckled and replied that not every noble girl grew up to be a rare gem like his daughter-in-law. She added that what truly mattered was finding a daughter-in-law capable of sharing their family's burdens in the future. The butler then announced the next contender, the second young lady, from the Ye family. Almost immediately, a cheerful voice answered the call. A blonde girl wearing a frilly Lolita-style dress darted into the arena, full of energy. With a bright smile, she hurried to the center of the field and gave a graceful bow toward the viewing box. Yuanguan of the Ye family, honored to participate, she said proudly. Watching her lively display, the boy's mother smiled faintly and remarked that the girl clearly knew how to act sweet to earn favor. Then, the butler called for the final contestant, the third young lady, from the Ling family. At that moment, a short-haired girl wearing plain, simple clothes began walking toward the arena. Her calm demeanor and modest appearance stood in stark contrast to the other two participants. As she entered the field, the three young women stood side by side, the atmosphere grew tense. This was the official start of the skill test. In the viewing box, both the grandfather and the mother watched closely, their expressions disgusted. Meanwhile, our protagonist tilted his head, deep in thought. He wondered if this girl from the Ling family was connected to Sanson, and how she could have ended up in such a dangerous competition. Down below, the three contestants faced each other, their eyes sharp and focused, ready for the test that would decide their fate. The short-haired girl drew the attention of the other two contestants with a simple "Yi." The blonde girl immediately pointed at her angrily, questioning if that was any proper way for a noble lady to behave. In the next scene we see the protagonist hung upside down, looking utterly stressed by the bizarre turn of events. Meanwhile, the short-haired girl held him casually by the foot, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. With a cheerful smile, she called him husband and said she would now be under his care. The protagonist irritated, shouting for her to put him down immediately. At that moment, his three sisters appeared, screaming at the girl to release him. Their faces were flushed with fury as they pointed at her. The youngest sister called out their brother's name cheerfully, joined by the other two sisters. Seeing all this unfold, the protagonist could only stare in disbelief, wondering how things had gotten so chaotic. The scene then flashed back to a few hours earlier, inside the Liu family arena where the skill test was underway. A young woman with long purple hair stood firm as a massive demonic boar charged at her at full speed. She lifted her glowing sword, gripping the hilt tightly and preparing herself to strike. With one precise slash, she cleaved the beast cleanly in two. After the battle, she stood tall in the arena, the remains of the monster scattered behind her. From the viewing box, the grandfather remarked that her skill was impressive, particularly since she hadn't yet undergone a divine awakening and was only wielding the family sword. The protagonist reflected on the girl's strength and how she was fighting over an arranged marriage, noting the oddity of the situation. Soon, the butler announced the start of the second round. The representative from the Ye family stepped into the arena, signaling the next stage of the skill test. The blonde girl now faced a demonic boar even more fearsome than the previous one. Its eyes glowed wickedly, and it snarled as it charged toward her. With a confident grin, she spoke to the beast, telling it to go to a better place. Instantly, a strange pink energy shot from her, striking the creature directly in the brain. The animal recoiled, disoriented by the attack. Influenced by her power, the beast went completely berserk, spinning wildly and fleeing from the blonde competitor. Finally, it slammed into the arena wall with tremendous force. The impact was so powerful that the creature was instantly defeated, collapsing lifelessly onto the stone floor. The protagonist and his sisters watched from above, utterly stunned by the sheer power the girl had displayed. Calmly, the blonde girl waved to the crowd, announcing that she had cleared the challenge. Curious, the protagonist's mother turned to the family head and asked what kind of power that had been. He explained that it was her family's divine awakening, a type of mental interference capable of controlling and disorienting opponents. The mother frowned, worried that such a power might allow the girl to manipulate the entire family in the future. The grandfather, however, simply chuckled, saying it posed no threat as long as the divine awakening was not of a higher level. Watching everything, the protagonist thought about how his mother's milk boosted his own power and began to wonder what other secrets these noble families might be hiding. Soon after, the next participant from the Ling family was announced, stepping into the arena. The purple-haired girl from the first round observed the newcomer carefully, her expression serious. Meanwhile, the blonde competitor taunted the new entrant, claiming that the Ling family must have been scraping the bottom of the barrel for this participant. Hearing this, the protagonist's mother's face with anger. She sharply called the blonde girl a rude little brat for her insolence. The protagonist's sisters grew extremely anxious when they saw who had joined the Ling family. Their worried faces stared down from above as the scene unfolded. To the protagonist's shock, they realized that their youngest sister was dressed as a maid among the Ling group. Panic surged through him, knowing that if the Ling competitor failed, his sister would be caught in the danger as well. On the arena floor, the short-haired girl now faced a massive demonic boar. The protagonist's eyes widened as he watched, wondering if she was just going to stand there and do nothing. In the luxury viewing box, the grandfather and the butler exchanged mischievous glances, hinting at a sinister plan. The enormous beast crouched, ready to charge at the girl while the family observed from above. The protagonist's mother demanded, "Why do we need to let the Lin family participate? We could simply kill them. The monster is weak, she can easily win the fight, so why risk it?" The grandfather replied calmly that to remove a target, the attack had to look like an accident. He gestured toward the arena and told his daughter-in-law to watch. their family would deal with the enemy without leaving any evidence. The boar lunged forward at full speed, but the short-haired girl remained completely still. A smug smile appeared on her face as she remarked silently, wondering if that was all the beast could do. The creature leapt at her, but she raised a blue defensive magic barrier and stopped the attack with just a single finger. With precision and confidence, she tried to unleash her power, striking the monster with a punch wrapped in a blue aura. But to her shock, the creature didn't falter. Instead, it roared in agony as fiery energy erupted from its body. Flames engulfed it entirely as the competitor stepped back. The grandfather and the butler watched the scene unfold, pleased that everything was going according to plan. The monster suddenly transformed into a C-rank mutant boar king, its body radiating a fierce yellow aura. The protagonist's mother turned to the grandfather with a cold smile and said, "So this was the plan all along. She has no chance of surviving now." The three of them smiled in satisfaction, while our protagonist trembled in fear. The blonde competitor laughed confidently, clearly pleased that the monster's evolution meant one less opponent to worry about. In contrast, the purple-haired girl studied the arena carefully, her expression growing more serious by the second. Seeing how things were turning out, the protagonist and his sisters were in complete panic. The protagonist realized that, to avoid being exposed, he would have to resort to his secret move. Without hesitation, he began drinking milk from his mother, but she scolded him for picking such terrible timing. However, to her shock, the protagonist suddenly spat out the milk he had just drunk, splattering it onto her body. Furious, his mother pushed him away, shouting at him for spitting on her again. But then, something unexpected happened. The milk scent flew across the arena, catching the monster's attention. The massive creature caught the scent of the essence in the air and instantly fixated on it. With a thunderous roar, the mutated boar charged toward the woman, who was still surrounded by a faint pink aura. Completely bewildered, the protagonist's mother froze in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening. As the beast closed in, she instinctively prepared to throw the protagonist to safety, while his two sisters braced themselves to defend her. Before they could act, the short-haired girl from the Ling family stepped forward and calmly said to leave it to her. A strange, glowing power formed in her hand as she summoned a spell. Suddenly, countless thorns burst from her hand at incredible speed, spiraling around the giant boar. Within moments, the creature was completely bound and immobilized by the thick vines. From the luxury box, the grandfather and the butler stared down in shock at the unexpected turn of events. The protagonist's mother was equally stunned, wondering aloud what kind of wood-based divine awakening could produce such a power. The grandfather leaned back with a grin, saying it was interesting, though still not quite on the same level as his grandson's abilities. Even so, he couldn't help but acknowledge the remarkable strength the girl had just displayed. The young competitor glanced up, saying this skill called Ghostblood Vine. Even the purple-haired girl looked surprised, clearly impressed by her opponent's sudden display of strength. Meanwhile, the blonde competitor sneered in disgust, declaring that she'd never want to be tangled up in something like that. From the viewing box, the grandfather calmly explained that this ability was capable of defeating creatures of higher rank by draining their very essence. Down in the arena, the monstrous boar's body began to wither away, its life force rapidly consumed until nothing remained but a skeleton. The butler turned to his master and asked what they should do about the girl. With a calculating smile, the family head said he had a much better plan in mind. His gaze shifted toward his grandson, who was nestled in his mother's arms beside his two sisters. His idea was simple: to make the girl his grandson's future bride, securing the Ling family's power for themselves. In the present time, both sisters shouted angrily at the Ling family girl, demanding that she put their brother down immediately. After a few moments, the white-haired sister turned to Sansan, the youngest, scolding her and demanding to know how she ended up alongside the mysterious Ling family girl. On the verge of tears, the youngest couldn't bring herself to answer, which only made the red-haired sister lecture her harder for disappearing on her own. Feeling the light taps from her sister's scolding, the youngest lowered her head. But the protagonist quickly interrupted, saying now wasn't the time for arguments. The Ling family was about to be completely wiped out. Everyone in the room looked at protagonist. The Ling family girl simply smiled and replied that she was already aware of that fact. Her calm response left the protagonist and his sisters completely speechless. With a serious expression, the girl from the Tang family told them she didn't have much time and needed to share something important. The group immediately turned their attention to her. She asked if they had already awakened their systems. The protagonist and his sisters froze for a moment, but then nodded in agreement. She continued, explaining that they must have noticed unusual powers and abilities manifesting within them, signs that their true potential had already begun to awaken. The young woman, who was meant to become the protagonist's future wife, smiled softly and asked if they truly believed in miracles. In a shy and playful way, they all shook their heads no. She then pulled little Sansan into her arms and gently said that every miracle comes with a terrible price. The trio of siblings froze, stunned by her words. The girl held Sansan close. Sansan looked calm yet sorrowful. Curious, the protagonist asked what she meant by that. The Line family girl began to explain. In another timeline, little Sansan had lost her beloved sisters, brother and had been left completely alone. A vision flashed through her mind, memories of her sisters being taken from her, leaving her in despair. It was during that moment of isolation that she discovered her divine awakening, the power to steal abilities. With this gift, she could take the divine awakenings and skills of others as her own. In that chaotic world, she became a villain feared by all. Her name alone was enough to strike terror into anyone who heard it. But eventually, she found a way to turn back time. She gave up every ounce of her stolen power just to return to the past, to save the people she loved most. The protagonist was left speechless. He finally managed to ask if little Sanson had truly been reborn. The small girl only nodded, confirming his suspicion. The girl held little Sanson's face lightly, saying that the little one was once a ruthless demon who terrified everyone. In her past life, Sanson had been known as a powerful villain, unmatched and unstoppable. She went on to explain that the system interface they all used was actually a mental projection created by Sanson herself. Hearing this, the three siblings looked at their glowing system screens, trying to comprehend what she meant. The girl continued, saying that each time they used their systems, it slowly drained Sanson's remaining energy. As she spoke, little Sanson, sitting quietly, released a faint but powerful aura. The girl continued explain that all of their divine awakening abilities were the results of Sanson's past research, experiments that had nearly cost her life. The protagonist, wide-eyed, asked about his own divine awakening and how Sanson managed to obtain it. The young woman revealed that Sanson had sacrificed her remaining power to save him from a deadly situation. To do so, she had infiltrated the capital's inner circle and even defeated the head of the powerful Mu family, enduring countless hardships along the way. Overcome with emotion after hearing the truth, the protagonist and his sisters ran toward Sanson, their hearts filled with both sorrow and gratitude. The siblings rushed forward and wrapped little Sanson in a tight group hug. Little Sanson began to cry, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming happiness of finally being reunited with her beloved siblings. The touching scene faded, and the setting shifted to a rundown bar filled with dim lights and strange music. Inside, a blonde woman was dancing around a pole, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. A blonde man entered and tried to flirt with her, grinning confidently. The woman, with heterochromia in her eyes, smiled playfully and thanked him for the attention. Then, without warning, she swung her leg up close to his face. Instead of backing away, the man leaned in and actually smelled her foot, completely entranced as he murmured how amazing it was. Just then, a green-haired man appeared beside them, shaking his head in disbelief and asking if the blonde had completely lost his mind. But as he looked closer, his expression darkened, something was clearly wrong. Moments later, the blonde man started to sweat, his head spinning as if his senses were failing him. The pair, the dancer and her green-haired partner, exchanged sinister smiles, revealing their true intentions. The next scene cut to a dark basement. There, the blonde man was tied up, struggling helplessly as the same woman from before stood over him, clearly enjoying torturing him. She leaned in with a teasing smirk and struck an intimidating pose, her eyes glinting with amusement. Suddenly, the protagonist's grandfather's butler entered the room, exuding an aura of authority. His expression turned cold as he commanded the captive to reveal everything without leaving out a single detail. Terrified, the blonde man pleaded for his life and began explaining that his mission had been to stop a wave of rampaging beasts. The butler listened silently, his gaze sharp and unyielding. The man continued, saying that after defeating the creatures, he had been paid for the job. But the older man's calm demeanor broke, his face twisted in anger as he shouted that the fool never should have interfered with his son. Panicking, the blonde man cried out that it wasn't him, insisting that the real culprits were three masked individuals. The old man narrowed his eyes, curiosity flickering across his stern face. He leaned closer to the trembling prisoner and demanded to know who those masked people were, where they came from, and what their names were. The blonde captive stammered, shaking his head frantically. He said he didn't know, he had only caught a glimpse from afar. All he could make out were two girls and a small child among them. The old man froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. 2 girls and a child? The information clearly struck a nerve. He composed himself and pressed on, asking which team the blonde man was part of and who his captain was. When the answer came, the red pomegranate team, the man in the suit was visibly startled. That name triggered an old memory. He muttered to himself about a portal, one connected to creatures of immense power. Realization dawned in his expression. Then, cold and emotionless, he turned to the woman standing nearby, the same dancer from before, and ordered her to dispose of the prisoner. Panic filled the man's eyes. He screamed desperately, reminding them that they had promised to let him go. But before he could say more, the woman's shoe slammed into his face. Blood splattered as she pressed her foot against him, keeping him pinned with a cruel smirk. The old man calmly stated that he had promised not to torment him, but that didn't mean he couldn't make an example out of him. With that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing as he left the basement. Moments later, he arrived at the rooftop of the building where his son had been defeated by someone before dying. The butler looked around, searching for any clues that could reveal the identity of his son's killer. Soon, he noticed several cracks on the ground. He stepped closer and examined them carefully. After a thorough inspection, he discovered faint footprints, small ones. Following the trail, he eventually came across a massive crack on the rooftop, clearly caused by a powerful energy blast. His expression grew serious. He moved to another part of the building, analyzing the patterns with careful precision. After a moment of silence, his gaze hardened. He had reached a conclusion. A brief flashback appeared, the old man cradling the protagonist's little sister, wounded and unconscious in his arms. He thought to himself that what he discovered might be crucial, and that he needed to confirm his theory as soon as possible. The scene shifts back to the bar glowing under a bright neon sign. Inside, the blonde dancer sways gracefully under the dim lights, putting on a captivating performance for the crowd. The music hums low and sultry as a green-haired man steps away from the stage and enters a quieter back room. There, seated with a cup of something warm in hand, is our hero's butler. The butler calmly asks if he's found any new information. The green-haired man nods and pulls out a worn photograph. He explains that it wasn't easy, but he managed to track down the target. According to his report, the man they were looking for was just a D-ranked nobody who lived with 3 sisters, and died about 6 months ago. The butler takes the photo and looks at it closely. The picture shows a young man smiling brightly beside 3 girls. It's our protagonist in his past life. The butler's expression hardens as he confirms that the incident indeed took place half a year ago. He then recalls that this was the same time when the boy's parents went on a mission to hunt the Liu family's beast, a mission that led to disaster. A montage flashes through his mind, images of the hunt, the monstrous transformation, and the tragedy that followed. He remembers how 2 girls had risked their lives to protect the boy, and the powerful treasure he managed to obtain that day. Back in the present, the butler handed the green-haired man a glowing blue orb pulsating with divine energy as a reward for the information he had provided. The man accepted the reward respectfully, thanking the butler for his generosity. As the butler turned to leave, his expression hardened. In a solemn tone, he vowed to avenge his son, no matter the cost. The scene shifts, revealing a baby bottle filled with milk. The black-haired sister asked our protagonist why he was staring at it. He replied that lately, he had been drinking a lot of milk from his mother, yet his divine awakening rank remained stuck at peak C rank. He continued, suddenly voicing the question that had been bothering him: why can ordinary people only reach the peak of B rank, while nobles can go far beyond? His sister paused for a moment, glancing at him thoughtfully. Then, she knelt down beside him and softly explained that the true human limit really not B rank. Human can go further by training. The reason nobles advance further, she said, is because the entire ranking system was created by the noble houses themselves. Her words hit like a shockwave as she revealed the truth. The system was designed to make everyone believe the nobles are superior, born to rule over others. Our boy stared at her in disbelief. Then, with a serious expression, she added that she learned all this in her past life. The scene shifted into a flashback, a vision of the once innocent girl now standing as a powerful and feared villainess. She explained that in the capital, the 8 great clans who controlled everything also held the secret to surpassing S rank. The nobles guarded this truth fiercely, using others as mere stepping stones for their own rise. Wide-eyed, our protagonist asked what lay beyond S rank. The girl clenched her fists, anger flashing across her face, and said she didn't know. All she knew was that the nobles used awakened individuals like living power sources, draining their strength to fuel their own evolution. Her voice trembled as she admitted that, in her past life, she had wanted to destroy the entire world for what they did. But everything changed when she found a way to return, to save her brother and reunite with him. Moved by her pain, our boy gently took her hands and promised that no matter what happens, he'll never let her be alone again. She smiled through her tears, her heart finally at peace, and told him that this time, she and the others would fight by his side. Their emotional moment was suddenly shattered as the door burst open with a loud bang. Standing there was the protagonist's fiancée, smirking as she announced that their sweet little family moment was about to be interrupted by a serious crisis. Startled, our boy and his sister turned toward her in confusion. The fiancé then explained that the old butler from the Liu family had just arrived, and he wasn't alone. Hearing the news, the 2 siblings exchange uneasy glances, clearly worried about what's coming. The fiancé, wearing a smirk expression, explains that the man who just arrived with the butler claims to be protagonist mother's childhood friend. The protagonist asks what that has to do with any sort of crisis. She replied that the butler suddenly bringing someone connected to protagonist mother seems way too suspicious to be a coincidence. A few minutes earlier, in another part of the mansion, the fiancé was being trained by a strict maid on proper noble etiquette. The maid announced that today's lesson would begin with posture. Looking completely uninterested, the fiancée lazily replied that she understood. The maid immediately scolded her for keeping her hands in her pockets, reminding her that a proper lady must never act that way. It was against the rules. At that moment, the fiancé heard someone shouting from outside, "How dare you lay hands on me? Do you even know who I am?" Turning toward the noise, she saw guards dragging away a young silver-haired man who was struggling fiercely. In a close-up, the man yelled, "I am a close friend of your Liu family's young madam," referring to the protagonist's mother. The maid glanced over briefly, then told the fiancé that no distractions were allowed. Incidents like that, she said, were common among noble clans. Continuing the lesson, the maid reminded her that she needed to focus on her engagement ceremony and learn to act like a proper lady. The fiancé sighed and muttered, okay, I got it. Without anyone noticing, she discreetly flicked a tiny red object from her hand. It flew through the air and attached itself to the man's collar as he was being dragged away. Almost instantly, a small white flower bloomed from it, a hidden listening skill. The same kind of flower appeared on her ear, allowing her to hear everything. Through the flower, she listened closely as the man furiously cursed at the butler, shouting that if she found out, she would kill whoever sent him to stir up trouble. The scene then shifted back to the present, where the fiancé stood before the protagonist and Sanson, explaining everything she had heard. The protagonist smiles and asks if the phantom blood vine can also be used for spying. With a sly grin, his fiancée replies that she and Sanson were once a famous assassin duo, masters of stealth and information gathering. Curious, the protagonist's sister asks what kind of intel she managed to uncover. With a playful smirk, the fiancé teases him, wondering if the man the butler locked up might actually be his mother's secret admirer, and if Lady Lu had quite a few admirers back in the day. The protagonist thinks for a moment and then, to everyone's surprise, nods. He recalls some rather suspicious moments from his childhood, well, technically before he was even born. He remembers his mother often telling his grandfather that she was taking him out shopping, but her trips always seemed to end somewhere unexpected. The scene cuts to a flashback of his mother carrying the baby protagonist through the market, finishing her errands, and then quietly stepping into an empty fitting room. A hand suddenly pulls her gently inside, and a man greets her warmly, complaining that she took too long. She laughs softly, saying she's been busy taking care of this little glutton son of her and needed a break, so she came to relieve some stress. Then the two share a moment that clearly wasn't about groceries. Meanwhile, the baby protagonist had been casually hung on a nearby coat rack by them, dangling there like a tiny spectator before the chaos began. Protagonist looks absolutely mortified by what he's witnessing. Back in the present, the fiancé laughs and says that sort of thing is pretty normal in noble families. After all, even his father had his fair share of side stories. The protagonist then frowns, wondering why the butler would imprison the man if affairs are so common. Hearing his question, the protagonist's sister falls silent, her expression turning thoughtful as she tries to make sense of everything. After a moment, she glances toward the fiancé, as if searching her face for some kind of clue or explanation. Seeing no answer there, she turns back and gently takes her brother's hand. With a serious look, she quietly suggests that maybe someone within the Lu family has started to doubt his true lineage, believing he might not fully share their blood, and could be the result of one of their mother's, more, private connections. The fiancé nods in agreement, saying it's quite possible. After all, there's hardly any other reason they'd drag him into this mess. Hearing that, the protagonist folds his arms with a clearly irritated look, his expression showing just how done he is with the situation. But after a brief pause, a confident grin spreads across his face as he turns toward the girls. He assures his sister not to stress over it, reminding her that he's got her reincarnation ability to back him up. His sister freezes for a second, caught off guard by his confidence, her cheeks turning slightly red. Then, realizing he's right, she smiles and nods in agreement. Just then, the calm moment shatters as the bedroom door bursts open, cutting their conversation short in an instant. Behind the door, the white-haired sister came running in, her voice filled with urgency as she announced that their grandfather had called for her brother immediately. The protagonist's fiancé calmly replied that they had already begun to act. Confused, the white-haired sister frowned and asked what she meant, who exactly was acting, and what was going on. Leaning closer, the fiancé whispered everything into her ear. After listening, the white-haired sister's eyes widened in panic. She asked frantically what they should do now. Were those people planning to harm her brother, and who could possibly be behind it? Crossing his arms, the protagonist spoke up, saying that based on what his fiancée had told them, someone seemed to be spreading rumors about his mother's affair. It was just a guess, but he suspected it might be his grandfather's butler, though he couldn't be entirely sure. The fiancée turned to the sisters and explained that the Lu family had been using their brother as a poster boy, and as everyone knew, noble families cared deeply about their reputation. They wouldn't harm him until they had solid proof. Still uneasy, the black-haired sister frowned and said she didn't trust nobles, calling them cunning old foxes who could strike without warning if things didn't go as planned. The fiancé tried to reassure her, saying they wouldn't act immediately, and besides, we all had your brother's back. The protagonist smiled faintly, holding one of his sister's hands, and said gently that she was right, but if they didn't go soon, others might grow suspicious. Opening his arms, he turned to his white-haired sister and said, "Carry me to grandfather's room, sister." She nodded, picked him up carefully, and left the room, leaving behind the black-haired sister and the fiancé, who watched in worried silence. The sister carried the protagonist into grandfather's study room and announced, she brought the young master, as master asked. Grandfather nodded and told the white-haired sister she could leave. The protagonist settled between grandfather's knees while his sister watched with a worried expression, thoughts of her brother's safety heavy on her mind. The boy met her gaze and, with a single look, told her he would be fine, she could trust him and go. She bowed to grandfather and slipped from the room. Minutes later the protagonist's father stumbled in, half asleep and grumbling about being called so early, grandfather, scolding him for fooling around outside and failing to keep his house in order, then ordered him to follow to the basement. The father protested that he'd only been making connections because you asked me to do, he'd been with young Master Zhang from the capital, but grandfather's anger did not ease. In the basement the butler waited, a whip in his hand. Beside him, bound with rope and badly beaten, lay the silver-haired man, one of the protagonist's mother's secret lovers. The butler bowed to the young master as grandfather instructed him to hold the boy. Smiling, the butler took the protagonist into his arms, but the smile curdled into something cruel and predatory the moment the child was close. Grandfather asked if the silver-haired man had talked. The butler said the man had once bragged everywhere about their relation but was now strangely silent. The protagonist's father demanded to know what was being bragged about. Grandfather spat that his son had been messing around with other women's, couldn't even guard his own women, and that someone had sneaked into his room without him noticing. The father stood dumbfounded, then flew into blind rage, vowing to find and kill the woman if his reputation was ruined and his capital connections jeopardized. Grandfather cut him off, furious, reminding him of the trouble he and the family had taken arranging marriages and alliances. Stunned, the father fell silent as grandfather announced they had captured both lovers and ordered a DNA test. The butler smiled placidly, cradling the boy. The protagonist realized exactly what would come next, a test. As the butler prepared the needle and declared the procedure would be quick, the protagonist smiled the innocent smile of a child. Then, as the butler drew the blood, he leaned in and whispered so only the boy could hear, "You think that because you share blood with him you can act without fear?" He held the vial and hissed, "My son's death will be repaid with the lives of your siblings." The boy froze, the butler's words and expression confirming the terrible truth. The butler was behind it all. The protagonist breaks into a cold sweat as the shocking truth hits him. Panic spreads through his chest while the butler turns around with a sharp, calculating expression, fully prepared to continue with his plan. The protagonist can't understand why the butler looks so confident when the test shouldn't work at all. Just then, the machine starts to beep, and the old man announces with a pleased smile that the results have finally arrived. The lover, trembling and drenched in nervous sweat, waits helplessly for the outcome of the DNA test. The protagonist's father demands to know the result while the butler reads the paper slowly. The grandfather observes everything with a stern expression, only adding to the tension building inside the boy. Then, with a polite smile, the butler congratulates the master and reveals that the test shows a negative result. The prisoner immediately breaks down, screaming that he had nothing to do with it and begging desperately for his life. Meanwhile, the protagonist's father just scoffs, completely indifferent to the man's suffering. The butler asks the head of the family what should be done with the prisoner to avoid damaging the family's reputation. The family head stares down at the man with an icy look, but before he can answer, the protagonist's father points toward his son and says that he wants to test the boy next, just to make absolutely sure. The protagonist freezes in terror, unsure how to escape this situation. The butler walks over and collects a blood sample from the father first. Then he approaches the little master with the vial still in hand. Trying to buy time, the protagonist suddenly bursts into tears, pretending to fear the needle. The butler flinches, visibly thrown off by the reaction as sweat runs down the side of his face. The grandfather takes his grandson's hand gently and tells him to let the butler proceed with the test. Sitting on his grandfather's lap, the protagonist squeezes his small hand tightly, wondering how he can possibly get out of this. He remembered what his fiancée urges him to stay composed so he doesn't expose himself. Taking a deep breath, the protagonist decides to gamble everything. He opens his hand, allowing the butler to move closer and prepare to draw his blood. The butler collects the blood from the protagonist while he sits in his grandfather's arms. The old man places both samples into the machine and activates the test. Soon, the device starts to beep, and a slip of paper begins printing out the DNA result. The protagonist's father immediately asks the butler for the outcome, unable to hide his impatience. When the butler checks the paper, his hands start to shake. His face goes pale, and he stammers in disbelief, confused by what he's reading. The protagonist sees straight through the man's performance and quietly calls him a cold fox in his thoughts. Trying to keep his composure, the butler quickly hands the test result to the boy's father. The man snatches the paper and studies every detail, his eyes glowing green as he reads the result. A wave of shock hits him, followed by boiling fury. In a rage, he shouts that he will get rid of the boy and the woman, then lunges forward. The grandfather stops him with a thunderous command, halting the attack mid-motion. In the next instant, the old man delivers a fierce slap across the father's face. Stunned, the man demands to know why the old man would strike him. The butler stands off to the side, watching the entire exchange with wide-eyed astonishment. The head of the family calls him an idiot and reveals that he has long been aware of all the man's affairs. The protagonist's father tries to defend himself, insisting it was nothing more than networking. And honestly, what kind of excuse is that? Anyway, returning to the scene, the grandfather's expression darkens as he warns that nothing bringing disgrace to the family should ever happen. Trying to save face, the young man's father asks if they should simply ignore what they now know and continue wasting resources on the boy. But the grandfather responds coldly, saying the protagonist has already consumed many resources, and the time has come for an evolution mission. The father freezes, confused, and asks what exactly the old man means by that. The grandfather calmly explains that if the protagonist survives the evolution mission, he could become a powerful asset to the family. Then he adds that regardless of the outcome, it's time for the father and his wife to try for another child. Hearing this, the protagonist's father explodes with anger, shouting that he can't stand that woman and wants to get rid of her. Before he can say another word, the grandfather delivers another sharp slap to his face. Stunned, the man grabs his cheek and demands to know why he was struck again while the old man continues holding his grandson. The head of the family calls him a fool and reminds him of the political alliances at stake. Their daughter-in-law must produce several heirs to strengthen the Liu family bloodline. Terrified by the pressure, the kid's father nods quickly, agreeing to everything. Meanwhile, the baby protagonist pretends to be asleep in his grandfather's arms, successfully fooling everyone in the room. The butler stands nearby wearing a stone-cold, calculating expression, clearly plotting his next move. Across the room, the tied-up prisoner trembles and asks if he can finally leave. Without a hint of sympathy, the grandfather orders them to make him disappear. The butler accepts the command, and the desperate prisoner begins begging for his life as the group walks away. Few minutes later, watching all of this, the protagonist realizes he'll have to weaponize his cuteness if he wants to lower everyone's guard and survive. Just then, the grandfather lifts the little boy into the air, and the protagonist plays along, looking like he's enjoying himself. But before the mood can settle, his furious father storms back in, complaining about how many resources are being poured into the child. The old man shuts him down immediately, telling him to keep quiet and return to his room with his wife. Clenching his jaw but unable to argue, the kid's father follows the order and storms out, clearly irritated. The grandfather then looks down at the protagonist, his expression serious. In his mind, he knows that the boy's entire future depends on how he performs from this moment onward. A little later, the white-haired sister brings the protagonist back to his room. As soon as they step inside, the other girls ask what happened. The protagonist then reveals that the butler was the mastermind behind everything. The girls freeze in shock, demanding to know why he'd pull something like that. He explains that the butler discovered the truth about his own son and decided to set a trap. The red-haired sister instantly panics. She jumps up, shouting that they need to pack their things and run. But the protagonist's fiancé catches her arms and tells her to calm down, reminding her that they wouldn't make it far even if they tried. Frustrated, the redhead clenches her fists and declares that if they can't escape, then they'll just fight. The other two immediately grab her shoulders, begging her not to act recklessly. His fiancé then looks at the protagonist and asks how three sisters from the same family could be so different. The protagonist smiles softly at her question and stays quiet for a moment before answering. He explains that Ye always took care of the others, making her the most mature. Because of that, the next sister grew up a little more naive and innocent. And Sanson, he says, was always following behind them like a tiny echo. His fiancé listens and then says the three of them fit together perfectly, and that forming a family like theirs is a blessing. Gazing off thoughtfully, she admits she never understood Sanson's decision in the past, but now it seems that she is starting to understand everything. With a gentle smile, she adds that she's truly envious of the bond they share. Our protagonist lights up immediately and beams at the comment from his fiancé. But the moment passes and he shifts back into a serious mood as he asks what they should do now since everyone is safe for the moment. His fiancée claps her hands together and calls everyone over for a family meeting. Hearing this, the three sisters who were playing on the floor pause and stare at her in confusion. The red-haired sister snaps, asking since when they became a family with the fiancé and begins complaining to San. The fiancé casually points out that she is basically their sister-in-law already and even turns to little Sanson asking if she agrees. The three sisters instantly get irritated by her boldness. Before the protagonist can react, his annoyed sisters grab him and pull him aside. They tell him firmly that they does not need a sister-in-law and that the four of them should stay together forever. Little Sanson becomes completely flustered by their sudden declarations and cannot figure out how to respond. Anger finally rises in the protagonist and he shouts at his sisters, telling them to stop arguing right now. He orders all three of them to sit and they obey without hesitation. After the scolding, the two older sisters sit pouting with their cheeks puffed out in frustration. His fiancée watches everything unfold and cannot hold back her laughter at the scene. The protagonist taps his sister's head and says he might have left them undisciplined for too long, which is why they became so rebellious. His fiancée gently pats him on the head and tells him he might not understand them as well as he thinks. He fires back that he has raised them since they were small, so he knows their personalities better than anyone. Winking at him, his fiancée teases that what he truly fails to understand is women. Hearing that, all three sisters look away, seeming to agree with the fiancé but too hesitant to tell the protagonist. Irritated, the protagonist tells her not to treat him like a child because he is actually much older than he looks. Everyone settles onto the floor so they can finally begin the family meeting. His fiancée starts by explaining that the secret behind evolution is controlled entirely by the noble clans. The protagonist and his sisters sit quietly, listening to every word. She continues by saying that families like theirs are nothing more than tools and that the first stage of evolution comes from a special fruit. This fruit grows in other worlds and is protected by terrifyingly strong creatures. She adds that even dragons guard this fruit. Hearing that, Xuang explodes in frustration, saying that this is basically sending their brother to get himself eliminated. But the protagonist's fiancé reminds them that since they come from the future, they already have a plan. She says that if each of them uses their strengths to cover the others, they can survive. Everyone nods in agreement. Later that night at the family mansion, the protagonist's father appears. He is drinking heavily as he wanders alone through the vast hallways of the estate. Eventually he staggers up to his wife's bedroom door. Without hesitation he kicks it open and storms inside. Inside the room, the protagonist's mother is relaxing in a pool with one of her maids. Outraged, she orders him to get out immediately and tells him he reeks of alcohol. The husband suddenly lunges at his wife, trying to kick her, but the maid throws herself between them and blocks the strike with her leg. The force sends her crashing into the pool with a splash. Shocked and furious, the protagonist's mother screams at her husband, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. He grabs her roughly and calls her a troublesome wife. In that moment, memories of his grandfather's stern face flash across his mind along with the warning that nothing should ever bring shame to the family. He remembers his grandfather ordering him to have another child with his wife, no matter what. Pulling her close, he mutters that it has been far too long since she has taken care of him. He grabs at the towel around her shoulders and yanks it away, leaving her exposed in the water. Enraged, she shouts at him again, demanding answers. He rips off his own shirt and declares that they will produce another child for the sake of both families. He steps into the pool and pulls her toward him, the moment turning tense and overwhelming. Her legs shift under the water as the situation escalates between them, but the scene fades without showing anything further. Meanwhile, far away from the mansion drama, the fiancé warns that the upcoming trial is extremely dangerous, so they need to be fully prepared. Hearing this, the protagonist says they should split tasks. He volunteers to retrieve the miraculous milk from his mother that acts as a healing potion. At the same time, the black-haired sister says she will head out to buy the equipment necessary for their mission. The protagonist then turns to his sisters and asks them to keep a close watch on the butler at the mansion, making sure he doesn't pull any tricks in their absence. The other two sisters agree without hesitation, promising to keep a close eye on the butler so he doesn't interfere. With that settled, protagonist prepares for his part of the plan. He straps a milk storage container around his small body and checks it twice to make sure it stays secure. Once ready, he waddles toward his mother's bedroom door and starts making baby sounds to draw her attention. From inside the room, his father snaps at her, shouting that she argues with the baby over milk every single day. The protagonist finds it strange that his father still obeys the old man's orders after everything that has happened, but he pushes the thought aside. Time is running out. He needs to collect the milk now before their mission starts. Channeling his electric energy, he shoots straight through the door in a burst of yellow lightning. In the blink of an eye, he is in the room, diving directly toward his mother. Startled, she gasps and demands to know what the two of them are doing barging in while she is already overwhelmed. Protagonist father glares at them, the boy, furious, while the protagonist's face ends up smeared with the milk he collected. A flashback hits his father. Their grandfather once berated him, scolding him for wasting the family's resources on endless parties. Even though he was furious during that lecture, he still ended up leaning in to drink the milk as well, determined to follow the old man's wishes. The protagonist's mother screams at them, saying they're both acting insane and that all their fighting is driving her crazy. Far from the chaos inside the mansion, the girls make their way through town to gather equipment for the upcoming mission. After some searching, they arrive at a shop, only for a towering man to block their path and order them to get lost, saying a place like this isn't for kids. The fiancée closes her eyes and says dogs like him always look down on others and obey the rich, while the black-haired sister nods in agreement. The shopkeeper's face twists in anger at their remark, and he immediately lifts his fist, ready to strike the girls without hesitation. But before he can even take a step forward, a heavy pouch bursts into view and slams straight into his face. The hit is so solid that his nose starts bleeding on the spot. Furious, he glares around to find the culprit, until he spots the spilled gold coins scattered across the counter. The moment he sees the glittering coins, his rage melts into a nervous grin. Stuttering out an apology, he quickly assures the girls that everything was just a misunderstanding. With a proud little smirk, the fiancé tells him to hurry up and bring out the high-quality gear because they are not interested in any cheap garbage he's hiding in the shop. Meanwhile at the mansion, the two maids pretend to mop the floors as the butler walks down the hall. They keep a careful distance, quietly trailing behind him while exchanging suspicious glances. When the butler turns a corner, they rush up to the now-closed door and stop in front of it, unsure of their next move. After a moment, they both lean in and press their ears against the door, straining to hear what's happening inside. Few minutes later inside the room, the grandfather stands firmly in the center of a glowing magic circle. Flames swirl around him as he opens a massive portal of blazing red fire. His voice echoes through the chamber as he declares that his grandson's talent is extraordinary, and that only by surviving this upcoming trial can the boy break his limits and rise to greatness. Hearing this, they finally understands the truth. The family is planning to eliminate everyone else to pave the way for the new heir's future. The fiancé just smiles with fierce confidence, vowing to look after the protagonist during the mission no matter what. With their preparations complete, the group of kids stands before the roaring crimson portal. Their faces tense yet determined, they take their first steps toward the deadly trial waiting on the other side. From a distance, the grandfather and the butler watch the children step through the blazing portal. At that moment, the butler's expression twists into a cold, sinister smile, hinting that he has a hidden scheme woven deep beneath this mission. The group soon arrives in a completely different world. Strange glowing plants light up the ground, and a shimmering lake sits high on a mountain peak, reflecting sparkling colors across the landscape. The girls are mesmerized, taking in the surreal beauty. The red-haired maid sighs in awe, saying this other world is absolutely breathtaking. But the protagonist reminds them sharply that beauty doesn't mean safety. In this place, danger lurks everywhere. Sanson asks where the evolution fruit might be, and fiancé explains that the fruit is guarded by a powerful creature they must locate. The protagonist then thanks Sanson in advance for helping, so they all start communicating through system messages. At that moment, the white-haired sister lifts her dress slightly, revealing a row of small bottles packed with milk strapped around her leg like a tactical belt. She grabs one and hurls it onto the ground. The bottle shatters, and the milk spreads out across the dirt. Without wasting a second, the whole group splits up and dashes to their designated hiding spots. The protagonist and his fiancée crouch behind massive rocks near the glittering lake. Across the area, the two sisters also take cover behind another boulder, eyes locked on the trap. The spilled milk soaks into the earth, creating a potent bait. Just then, a message flashes before the protagonist, sent by the red-haired sister. Movement detected. His posture stiffens immediately. Ripples disturb the lake. Bubbles rise to the surface, growing larger by the second. Their plan worked, the guardian beast has taken the bait. With a deep roar of water breaking, a massive purple serpent rises from the lake. Its scales shimmer like hardened plates of armor, and its glowing blue eyes glare straight at the milk-coated ground. The creature glides forward, its body slicing through the water in slow, deliberate motions. A notification flashes before the protagonist's eyes, identifying the monster. A dangerous rank of venomous serpent. His heart pounds. The trial has officially begun. But the red-haired girl waves off the danger, saying it's only a rank A beast and they already managed to beat a rank B before, so this one shouldn't be a problem. The protagonist immediately snaps at her, calling her a fool for underestimating the creature. He explains that the gap between rank B and rank A is enormous, and facing something like this is basically suicide. His fiancée looks surprised that protagonist is able to recognize such a rare monster so quickly. He tells them that since his talent was always considered low, he forced himself to study every single thing he could. In the flashback we see how he spent years fighting, learning, and enduring harsh training, all so he could survive and eventually reunite with his three younger sisters. Hearing his quiet confession, the girls get emotional and start sending crying emojis through their communication ability. The white-haired sister then sends another message, telling them to take a closer look at something on the creature's body. The fiancé notices it at the same moment and gets irritated, complaining that of all the places for it to grow, it had to appear on this monster specifically. The protagonist is stunned as the serpent floats motionless on the lake's surface. And right there, perched proudly on top of the creature's massive head, shines the evolution fruit. It glows brightly like a miniature golden sun, radiating a warm, sacred light. The fiancé sighs in frustration, saying their entire strategy of luring the beast away and snatching the fruit quietly is completely ruined now that it's sitting on the serpent's head. The black-haired sister then suggests draining the serpent's life force slowly with her ability, weakening it until they can bring it down. But the fiancé explains that the creature is far too powerful and incredibly fast. His energy-based skill wouldn't even be able to restrain it for a second. Protagonist tells everyone to stay absolutely silent. The enormous serpent roars toward the milk spilled across the sand, its voice vibrating through the ground. In the next instant, the beast lunges forward with terrifying speed and smashes its head into the ground where the bottle had broken earlier. Lifting its head again, it casually swallows the milk bottle along with a chunk of earth, as if it were nothing. With a confident smile, protagonist announces that he has a plan and that everyone needs to listen closely. He records a voice message and sends it to the group, laying out the new strategy step by step. Moments later, everyone receives the audio and replies that they understand exactly what they need to do. The fiancé then asks how the protagonist managed to earn the girl's trust so quickly. He answers quietly that he simply got lucky. They saved him when he had lost all hope and gave him something to live for again. With a determined expression, he adds that he failed to protect them once in the past, so this time he is willing to risk his life to keep them safe. Hearing this, the fiancé is genuinely moved. She says that meeting all of them in this life is a true honor. Our boy responds with a gentle smile before he rises to his feet, his resolve solid as stone. He shouts that it is time for everyone to move. The girls immediately respond in unison, saying they understand. With that, the protagonist and his fiancée dash forward together, their job being to grab the serpent's attention. Meanwhile, the two sister maids run in a different direction to complete their part of the distraction. Little Sanson also joins the plan, sprinting off to a safe position on her own. The creature surveys the area with cold, predatory eyes. The evolution fruit perched on its head glows like a beacon as it scans the landscape. After a moment, the massive serpent turns its attention toward the spilled milk on the sandy shore. The scent of the essence hooks its senses instantly, drawing it in. The beast tries to resist, shaking its head, but the smell is too tempting. Then suddenly, the serpent lunges forward at full speed, crashing headfirst into the exact spot where the milk had been spilled. The impact sends sand flying in every direction. Immediately after, the creature lifts its enormous head and swallows the milk along with a chunk of stone as if the ground were nothing more than crumbs. The serpent turns its massive head and spots more milk splattered inside a patch of bushes. Seeing the opportunity open up, the protagonist and his fiancée sprint forward with additional baby bottles gripped tightly in their hands. At that moment, a message notification pops up, and the sisters praise their younger brother's clever strategy. From another direction, the two maids also rush in with more bottles, ready to continue the mission exactly as planned. The serpent attacks again, its huge body crashing through the bushes, and the red-haired sister immediately sends a message complaining about what a waste of precious milk this whole thing is. Suddenly, the protagonist's fiancé sends a new message telling everyone to look closely at the serpent's belly. Hearing this, the red-haired maid shifts her gaze toward the massive creature. A strange feeling crawls up her spine, and she mutters that something about this situation feels way too easy. That's when they finally notice it. The serpent's belly is swollen to an enormous size, stuffed full of milk and chunks of debris it swallowed without thinking. The protagonist explains that surviving comes first, and after that they only need to wait for a proper opening. The creature thrashes violently in the lake, its movements becoming clumsier. The protagonist adds that if not for clever plans like this one, he would have been finished hundreds of times already in his past life. His fiancée urges everyone to stay alert because the monster is slowing down fast. With that signal, the three maids tighten their grips, preparing to launch into the next phase of the plan. Then suddenly, something begins rising out of the protagonist's shadow. A distorted shape stretches upward before forming into a man wearing a suit. Without warning, the figure lunges forward, aiming a deadly strike at the protagonist's back. His fiancée sees it first. She shouts a warning and instantly activates her ability, pulling him backward with a burst of force. The shadow figure's attack slices through the air where he stood a split second earlier. As the protagonist is yanked to safety, he finally gets a good look at the attacker. He recognizes the face immediately and demands to know how the butler managed to appear here. His fiancée's expression hardens. She realizes what is happening and says it must be a special divine awakening. She asks if the butler activated it the moment they left for the trial. In a flashback, the grandfather explains that his grandson's talent is exceptional and that he must face this trial to surpass his limits. Seeing the group leave, the butler quietly sends his shadow apostle clone into their shadows. In the present, the clone says he never expected them to survive this long. He declares that he's here to avenge his son, and if it weren't for him, the group might have survived this trial. Without hesitation, the protagonist and his fiancée yell to attack. The two combine their powers, unleashing a supercharged lightning spear infused with the girl's vine of thorns. The attack shoots straight through the butler's clone, but to their shock, it passes right through him as he begins to fade into the shadows. The two are left staring, bewildered, unable to comprehend what just occurred. The clone then moves silently through the shadows, closing in on them, but the fiancé grabs the protagonist, and they leap away together. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts nearby, echoing through the landscape and alerting the two sisters who were keeping watch from a distance. Frantic, they send messages, worried for their brother and his fiancée. The commotion catches the serpent's attention. It turns toward the source of the explosion and locks its glowing eyes on the protagonist and his fiancée. Just then, the butler's clone reappears, shouting that they will pay for what happened to his son before vanishing into thin air once again. The serpent, now enraged, charges straight toward them. The two sprint for their lives, narrowly avoiding the serpent's strikes. They realize the creature's speed is incredible, but also notice that their strategy is working. It is moving slower than before. Out of nowhere, a message pops up instructing them to split up. As they follow the command, the serpent spits venom in their direction. In perfect sync, the protagonist and his fiancée high-five to launch themselves apart, dodging the attack as the serpent lashes out furiously. The serpent's purple venom hits the ground. A wide trench forms, separating the protagonist and his fiancée from each other. Panic surges through him as he looks at his fiancée, wondering what they should do next. But before they can react, the creature lunges, its gaping jaws aimed directly at the boy. He braces himself, certain this is the end. His fiancée feels the same despair, fear filling her chest. Suddenly, a flashbang explodes nearby, and a voice yells for him to close his eyes. He obeys immediately. One of his sisters had thrown it, using a radiant bird crystal to create a blinding, high-quality flashbang. The light is so intense that even his fiancée groans at how bright it is. The serpent lets out a pained, furious roar as the blinding light confuses and disorients it. Seizing the moment, one of the sisters rushes forward and scoops the boy into her arms. They sprint away while the monster continues roaring, deafening them with its immense power. The fiancée clamps her hands over her ears, struggling against the sound, while the white-haired sister and the protagonist also struggling against the sound. Despite the chaos, a voice message suddenly pings. It's a command to focus their attacks on the serpent's bloated belly. Taking advantage of the confusion, the boy quickly issues the order to strike the creature's weak spot. The protagonist combines his thunder powers into a full-powered double thunder spear while the white-haired sister lifts him up. The attack shoots toward the monstrous guardian at full speed, delivering massive damage. The red-haired sister also unleashes her thunder attack at full power and hurls it toward the monster. At the same time, Xianxia unleashes a divine rank bow, sending a barrage of powerful arrows at the monster. The fiancée activates her unique ability as well, joining the fierce assault on the monstrous creature. The combined strikes collided with the serpent in a massive explosion, the shockwave rippling across the forest like thunder. The ground shook beneath them, leaves and dust scattering with the impact. Moments later, the group stood panting, sweat dripping from their brows, completely drained from the relentless fight. Before them, the giant serpent lay sprawled on the ground, a gaping wound marking its enormous belly. Both sisters exchanged astonished looks, murmuring about how surprisingly easy it had been to take down such a high-level beast. The fiancé with a smile reminded them that the victory was only possible because we had used rare, high-ranking equipment and spells in the battle. Xianxia's sharp eyes never left the fallen serpent, her instincts telling her something was off. The protagonist's voice broke the momentary calm. "Never let your guard down. Even a rank beasts are cunning," he warned, his tone tense. Suddenly, the defeated serpent surged to its feet, a horrifying roar shaking the air. It lunged straight for red-hair sister. She froze, fear rooting her to the spot as the beast's massive jaws closed in. Without a second thought, protagonist comes in front of her, channeling his lightning power in a blazing shield. Every ounce of his determination poured into the strike as he met the serpent head-on, using his full strength to protect his sister from the deadly assault. The serpent clamps its mouth shut around the protagonist, lightning bursting from between its jaws. Both the white-haired and red-haired sisters stare in terror as their brother is swallowed by the serpent. His fiancée is stunned by the sight, but Xianxia's scream cuts through the chaos as she calls out her brother's name. With a fierce leap, she screamed everyone to bring the creature down immediately. Startled, her sisters snap out of their shock, anger surging through them. Rage and urgency fuel the two sisters as they charge forward, fully committing to the fight. Together, the three sisters surged at the serpent, which lashed wildly as it tried to escape. Its massive body slithered across the sand toward the water, moving with alarming speed. Fiancé's thorny vine shot out, wrapping tightly around the monster's tail in an attempt to halt its desperate flight. But the serpent's strength was overwhelming. With a single powerful whip of its tail, it shattered the bindings and freed itself. Seeing the creature regain momentum, the white-hair sister eyes glowed a fierce blue as she unleashed her wind power. Using Gale Step, she propelled red-hair sister forward with incredible speed. With a running boost, she soared toward the serpent's tail and grabbed it firmly with her hands. The beast stiffened, caught off guard, unable to continue its escape. Straining with all her might to hold the massive creature, she shouted for Xianxia to strike, giving the team the opening they needed to turn the tide of battle. Xianxia swooped in, her red blade flashing as she shouted for her brother to hold on. The serpent let out a deafening roar, its fury echoing across the lake. Then the red-hair sister realizes the serpent's tail has been completely sliced off just like a lizard dropping its tail. Even without it, the creature still pushes itself forward in a desperate attempt to reach the water. With one last burst of strength, the monster throws its massive body into the lake and disappears beneath the surface. The three sisters break into panic and their cries echo across the shore as they call out for their brother. Everyone rushes to the lake's edge and a heavy silence falls over them while they stare at the rippling water with dread. Moments later, a wide patch of purple blood spreads across the surface, showing just how deep the serpent's wound is. His fiancée watches with a tense and irritated look, certain that their protagonist is truly gone. The sisters collapse to their knees and their tears fall uncontrollably. But then a message from the protagonist appears telling them he survived thanks to the protection gems he carried. Relief floods through them instantly. They stare at the stained water and shout his name with renewed hope. Deep below the lake, the heavily injured serpent drifts away, trying to escape. Inside its belly, the protagonist is still alive, covered in thick slimy goo and unsure of what to do next. Xianxia quickly sends him a message urging him to use his divine reincarnation ability before it is too late. She tells him to hurry, but he pauses and asks how the ability actually works. He explains that the technique needs a woman's belly as the vessel for his rebirth. Without hesitation, all three sisters immediately volunteer to be the host just to save him. His fiancée lets out a small smile and calls the sisters fools for their impulsive behavior. Then, with a confident tone, she declares that since she's the oldest and his fiancé, she'll take on the task herself and urges him to act quickly. The boy nods, warning that he plans to cause chaos from the inside before emerging. Taking a deep breath, he steels himself, determination blazing in his eyes. He activates his divine awakening martial mode and unleashes the thunder explosion, an overwhelming surge of energy rippling outward. Focusing all his strength, he fires an infinite thunder ray directly into the serpent's insides. The attack is so devastating that it rips through the monster's back from the inside out, leaving massive damage in its wake. The serpent writhes violently at the lake's bottom, convulsing under the relentless electric shock. Suddenly, a warning flashes, alerting them that the reincarnation range is nearly exceeded. Gritting his teeth, the boy pushes his energy release to the absolute limit. The continuous shocks force the creature deeper into the lake, sinking relentlessly. On the surface, the red-haired sister anxiously asks if their brother has emerged in her belly yet, noticing nothing seems to be happening. Sansan sees the system warning and her panic spikes as she realizes he's dangerously close to going out of range. Desperation floods the sisters as they frantically send messages, urging him to hurry. Inside the serpent, the boy struggles with all his strength, shouting how dare this monster try to hurt his sisters. His face contorts with the sheer effort, and in the process, he begins to spit up a strange, thick black blood, a sign of how intensely he's pushing himself to complete the impossible. The boy channels every last ounce of energy into a desperate, final strike. A system warning flashes, signaling that his body is nearing its limit and that reincarnation is now essential. On the shore, his sisters scream frantically, urging him to hurry, the urgency of the moment pressing down on them all. Deep inside the serpent, he unleashes a violent surge of electricity, shocking the creature from the inside out. The monster convulses, writhing in agony as the currents tear through it. Suddenly, a notification interrupts, the distance for reincarnation has been exceeded. Sansan screams in panic, her voice trembling with fear, realizing he is now out of reach. The sisters' hearts pound as helplessness sets in, calling for their brother. But then, in a flash of courage, his fiancée leaps into the lake without hesitation, shocking all three sisters. The water explodes into a massive splash as she dives in. The sisters shout their names in unison, their voices thick with worry, eyes locked on the rippling water. Slowly, bubbles rise to the surface, signaling movement beneath the waves. Moments later, the fiancé emerges gasping, barely keeping afloat, leaving the three sisters frozen in shock. Desperation gives way to action as they rush to the lake's edge to help her. The fiancé collapses from sheer exhaustion, then the red-haired sister asks in panic if their brother is inside her belly. The fiancé suddenly cries out saying it hurts inside her belly. She asks how she is even supposed to give birth. Sansan freezes in shock, not knowing what to do, and quickly asks her two sisters for help. They panic too, saying they have never seen anything like this. Then a message from the protagonist pops up, surprising all of them. He says he knows what to do and tells them to spread her legs quickly before he fully develops in her belly. He explains he will crawl out by himself. His fiancée spreads her legs right away and asks what she should do next. The moment the protagonist starts crawling out, she cries out again, telling him to hurry. The pain is too much and she cannot handle it anymore. With one last push, the protagonist crawls out by himself. She lets out a long breath and says giving birth to a child is really hard. Her sisters rush over calling for their brother. She repeats that it was harder than she imagined. A few minutes later, the white-haired sister holds their tiny brother and asks if babies are supposed to be this small. The red-haired sister says she has never seen one this small either. Sansan explains she has seen something similar when noble women secretly give birth. The baby is underdeveloped and it is dangerous. The protagonist tries to use his reincarnation skill rapid growth to return to his old size. But it fails because he was just born and has not regained his divine awakening. He tries to speak but his small body stops him. The sisters worry, asking what he is trying to tell them since they cannot understand him. Then the white-haired sister notices something wrong. The protagonist is slowly turning purple. Inside his mind he thinks crawling out drained all his strength and he cannot survive without energy. Sansan realizes the problem and tells the other sister to bring the milk they bought. The red-haired sister grabs the last milk bottle and tries to feed him. But he cannot drink it. She panics, asking why he is not drinking. Inside, the protagonist thinks he has no strength at all, so he cannot suck the milk. He wonders what to do. At that moment, the white-haired sister takes the bottle from her. She fills her mouth with the milk and then feeds it directly to the protagonist, helping him swallow and giving him the energy he needs. After the milk enters the protagonist's tiny body, starts glowing with warm energy. A few minutes later, his body grows back to normal size. His sister holds him in surprise, saying, "Brother, you became big again." The other two sisters stare at him, shocked at how fast he recovered after drinking the milk. The protagonist lets out a breath of relief, saying, "That was too close. I almost died back there." His sister clings to him again, saying, "Brother, you scared us to death." He sighs and says, "I just got born. Do not squeeze me this hard." He then turns to his fiancée and thanks her for helping him. She tells him it is fine and reminds him she is his future wife and they are family now. Right away, all three sisters thank her together for saving their brother and say that next time they will handle it if anything like this happens again. The protagonist looks embarrassed hearing them talk like that. His fiancée laughs, saying they are all being silly. Once everyone calms down, she tells them to collect the loot so they can return and deal with their enemies. The scene shifts to the serpent lying there, tied up tightly by the vines she created. They all feel relieved as the protagonist holds the evolution fruit in his hand. He asks what they should do with it now. His fiancée takes the evolution fruit and after checking it for a moment she tells him to eat it here and level up immediately. The white-haired sister asks if it is not dangerous to eat it in this place and wonders why they cannot return first. Sanson answers that the serpent their brother defeated is the king of this area. Because of that no other monster will come near them. If their brother evolves here he will become stronger and they will have a better chance when they face their enemies. Hearing this the sisters remember the shadow they saw earlier. It was only a clone. The butler is still at home preparing his next move. The protagonist agrees and says she is right. They have no idea what that butler is planning next. They must eliminate him or he will bring trouble to all of them. To do that they need to become stronger. With that thought he lifts the evolution fruit to his mouth ready to devour it completely. To find out what happens next, don't forget to hit subscribe, drop a like, and let me know in the comments if you want the next part. While the new update is cooking, check out these 4 recaps, they'll keep you entertained. See you in the next recap.